Good evening and welcome to the 6th meeting of fiscal year 2025 for the Milton Planning Board. At this time, I would like to now call the meeting to order and begin by introducing members of the Planning Board and the staff. If you'd like to.
Cheryl Tagayas, member.
Maggie Oldfield, member.
Jim Davis, member.
And Meredith Hall serving as chair. Sean Fahey, unfortunately, is not able to be here with us this evening, but with us on Zoom, we have our staff, Tim.
Tim Zerwinski, Director of Planning and Community Development.
Cheyenne.
Cheyenne Frazier, Assistant Director of Planning and Community Development.
And with us in person, Julia. And a big shout out to Julia for doing the Ice Bucket Challenge for the ALS Foundation at the Forbes House Museum. So
Nice job.
Good job on that. Very, very good. And second item is our administrative items, the approval of our minutes. And there's 2 sets of minutes, if members had a chance to look. And those would be August 6th and July 25th. Has everyone had a chance to review? I just had one item, which is not anything significant. Let me just see if I can find it.
Which set?
It was, that's what I just wanted to double check. It was about the legislature CPA. ADU.
That's probably the 6th then.
Yeah, that's what I just was looking. And it was where we stated legislature. Oh, yeah, EHOC, medium multifamily housing calculated. It referred to approved by the legislature and EOHLC. Sorry.
Oh, I see it, yeah.
It says, and I think it just should end in legislature because the
Yeah, that's correct.
EOHLC does not legislate.
Didn't pass it, right. Okay.
Right. So it
Correct.
just would end with that.
Do you see that? It's
Do you see-
the
is-
second to last sentence.
Are we talking about the 18th or the 6th?
The 6th, under the report to the Director of Planning and Community Development.
That's where it is,
The
yes.
very end of the second to last sentence.
3 lines, yeah. So 180 days after the passage of the legislation, period.
Okay.
I just did it in our
And then we can just take out of
OneDrive
EOHLC. Yep,
file, Julia, just so you know. I just did it today, okay?
great, thank you. That was the only item I saw.
Okay, then I'll make a motion to approve the, oh, actually, Jim, were you okay with the change I suggested?
I love you. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, then I'll make a motion to approve the July 25th and the August 6th minutes as amended.
Second.
Great. And all in favor? Because we're all here.
Aye.
Great, thank you. And then the next item for discussion is our next meeting dates, which is hard to believe. We are then into September. And we have, I believe, the 12th and the 26th of September would be our next meeting dates. Okay. And now for Tim, Director of Planning and Community Development, your update, please.
Thank you, Meredith. A couple, hopefully, quick things. And I just wanted to tee something up in case the board would be interested in putting it on a future agenda. I've been corresponding a little bit with Maggie and some of her neighbors about some work that's being done at a property on the corner of Hillside and Harlan Street. And it was brought to our attention that there was some work being done on stone walls on that corner. And so I talked to the building commissioner about it. We took a trip over there on a couple days during the week to kind of see what was going on. And effectively what's happened is, that house on that corner has been doing a lot of renovations and a lot of landscape work. And so all kind of, we've got a whole laundry list of building permits, in there for that house, but none of the types of permits that usually kind of, flag scenic road issues for us. And so I think what we've got is a property owner that, wasn't really aware of the scenic road rules. If you look at, or if you have a recollection of that part of Harlan Street, the stone wall is very low, covered with brush. A lot of that brush has been cleared out. The stone wall had been removed, and they're in the process. They may already been done at this point of replacing the stone wall in sort of the same location, where it was originally, placed. Now, the scenic road regulations have a component that's sort of, I don't want to call it an exception, but you don't need a scenic road permit if you're temporarily removing a stone wall and replacing it in the same location with the same materials. There is a bonding element to that, which obviously, this project did not go through. But I think ultimately, and so, this is again is something that the board, will want to discuss, potentially on a future agenda. I don't want to say no harm, no foul. Obviously we want people to follow the rules. The stone wall is there. And the brush has been cleared. It's kind of, a situation where, if we had been made aware of this, it still wouldn't be a situation where a scenic road permit was required, but it is something that kind of flew under our radar. Thankfully, we're not dealing with the situation where the stones are gone and we're in a sort of a punitive situation. But just a couple things to kind of put, on your plate potentially is, we can get some more information about, what's been going on over there. We took some pictures while we were driving by. We can take some sort of after pictures to kind of show you, what's been done over there. And then, if the board decides that, there wants to be some sort of communication or something, or some type of action, obviously that's your prerogative to do that. The other thing, and this is something, I've been discussing with Maggie and with some members of the Hillside Neighborhood Association, is just sort of like clarifying the scenic road regulations, trying to identify kind of where some gaps are. I think, in 95+% of cases, it's either a driveway permit or some other type of major site plan approval, special permit. We're fully aware of scenic road work. Sometimes there are cases like this where, there's either landscape work being done that doesn't require a permit, or, someone is just not aware of the regulations, and we kind of are dependent on, eagle-eyed neighbors to kind of flag things for us. I know last year we had a discussion about, how to, better publicize and educate the public on scenic road regulations. One thing that we're kind of, that the Hillside Association is kind of taking upon themselves is just sort of internal, to their own list, like, hey, here's the regulations. If you're doing work, here you go. I think we can avail ourselves of some of the other neighborhood associations, Brush Hill Association, Milton Hill Association. These are all places with scenic roads. But again, I know there were some ideas that were tossed out last year around kind of further public education. I think we tend to do a pretty okay job of grabbing these things before there's any kind of major damage that's done. But obviously, if someone, is going to take down a wall and they're not aware of the regulations, or they are aware and they just don't care, there are instances where things can slip through the cracks. And I think education, publicity is key to that. So one thing, just as a means of follow-up, and I can talk to Meredith about, a potential agenda item in the future, we'll send some, during and after photos of the work that's being done. And the board can kind of decide, is the juice worth the squeeze to kind of, try to kind of get this into the scenic road process. And then secondarily, if there wants to be a conversation around, publicity, public education, et cetera.
That's great, Tim. Yeah, I think that we definitely want to put that back on the agenda. And, one of the items I know we had talked about was getting an article in the Milton Times to just, put it out there and let people know where there are existing scenic roadways, what they are in town, where they're located. As far as, my experience, and I would defer to Cheryl, but even when they want to put back the stone wall, they're taking it down, they're reusing, putting it back. It has typically come before the Historical Commission and the Planning Board. And really, the reason being is it's on public property. And I think that's where part of the confusion is. Sometimes people think the stone wall, that's their boundary, or, that they don't realize it's not on their property. They think it's part of, their property goes all the way to the road.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
example,
The trigger for scenic roads is, public right of way. As a practical matter, almost all of these stone walls, straddle the property line, and I think, tie goes to the town in terms of whether it's in the right of way or not. I think relative to sort of the temporary removal of a wall, which we don't see that often, but we do see occasionally. The regulations allow you to do that without needing a permit. But again, there's procedures involved with that to kind of secure the replacement of the wall. So, a strict reading of the regulations, there was a violation here. But, the practical effect of the violation, is the wall is returned to its kind of normal, its location. And, you can be the judge of whether you think it's good or bad or indifferent. And we will send those photos around, and you can kind of check it out yourself and see. But I think, Meredith, you're right. I think, just knowledge of the ins and outs of the regulations. People are doing landscape work. They're not punching a driveway in. They're not doing anything major. It doesn't require any of the permits, and they just may not be aware that, touching that stone wall kind of has a requirement of a permit. So I think we'll get that on the agenda for the next meeting. I'll send you some photos of that particular property. And you can all, and I do think, and I see Elaine Carroll from the Times is in the audience. Maybe we'll chat with her about maybe getting something in the paper.
Yeah.
So we can work on that. A couple other quick items. Another thing that I didn't want to send it out ahead of the meeting just because you have a lot on your plate right now. But the health department just completed a project that they've been working on for quite some time, a community health assessment. This is, I don't know if it's the first time we've done one of these, but if it's not, it's the first time in a long time, of a real kind of deep dive into some of the public health issues that are facing Milton residents. I think the good news is that Milton is pretty healthy compared to the rest of the state. But obviously there are public health issues that every town deals with. And there are elements of kind of public health where Milton is not doing as well as it can. The reason I bring this up is there are a number of kind of planning, transportation, land use related, determinants of public health that I think the planning board could potentially play a role in affecting. And so I will send out that report. I'm going to kind of, I haven't finished reading it yet. I'm kind of a little bit through, but put together just a really brief memo, kind of highlighting the things that I think are most relevant to the planning board. It doesn't necessarily need to have any sort of immediate action, but just to kind of keep in mind, you may or may not be aware, public health and kind of landscape architecture are kind of the two foundational, pillars of the planning profession. It was all about public health back in the day. And so I think keeping that front of mind is really important. So it's a really great report that the health department did, Board of Health involved every step of the way, a lot of departments, a lot of focus groups of residents. So it's a really great job that they did. So I'll pass that around. And again, could be fodder for future discussion and kind of decision-making for the planning board.
Caroline Kinsella did send that to the planning board members.
Oh, did that go to all the members? Okay, I didn't. I
did.
saw that it went to the department heads, but okay, great. So you've got it. That's
But
awesome.
I would love for you to send out with your highlighted items on that. That would be of interest to see that. So
Yeah.
feel free to still send it to us again.
For sure, we'll do that.
Great.
I do think, Tim, I briefly read through some sections that I thought were most relevant to planning. And I do agree that there's things there that we should talk about. And even some things that are identified in certain areas For example, the area where the Neponset Esplanade initiative is proposed is mentioned with respect to Heat Island and with respect to other things. So I think it's definitely something that we should take a look at carefully.
I remember having a long conversation with the authors about heat island effect. That was my little baby in this report. So let's plant some trees over there. And one other quick thing, just to kind of by way of coming attractions. Julia, Cheyenne, and I were kind of poking around town as we often do, just checking things out. Passed by the ice house. We happened to run into the construction manager. He invited us in. That project is coming along. It's going to be very, very nice. It's still kind of the inside. They're working on finishes. Kind of half of it is kind of, still at the studs level. There's a lot of landscape and kind of hardscape work that needs to be done. But that project is coming right along. And I said, at some point, once the construction is a little bit further along and you sort of are going to be able to get a feel for what it's going to be, we'd love to be back and maybe do a tour, with the planning board and other folks who are interested. So that's moving along. And I mention that because there's been a lot of interest in that project. Everyone knows we have all sorts of approved 40Bs. This is the first one to come out of the ground. And we've been getting a lot of folks calling us, how can I get one of these units? When's the lottery? We did just set up a dedicated affordable housing opportunities page on the planning department website. So it's the first link on the left side if you go to the planning department. It's got some kind of permanent links to kind of regional affordable housing resources. These are places that we always send people to, even if there's not opportunities in Milton. There are regional opportunities, Boston Metro List, Housing Navigator. These are resources that we want people to use. We do have a current affordable housing lottery for 2 units at 71 to 73 Warren Ave, which are associated with the Walcott Woods project. Those are the final 2 affordable units that Walcott Woods is responsible for. So anyone out there in TV land that's watching, that's interested in an affordable condo in Milton, check out the planning department page. Applications are due in October. Good to get a head start on that stuff. As we get these lotteries coming online, Ice House will be next, East Milton after that, 711 Randolph Ave after that. That'll be where kind of we go for that. So it's exciting times. It's going to be a good project, and we'll get you all in there when the time is right. So,
Question, Tim?
Cheyenne, sorry, Cheryl.
Did you happen to ask if they have tenants for the commercial space? There's a lot of interest in that as well.
Cheryl, if I knew, that would have been the first thing I said. So they're sort of still because the construction is still, there's still a fair amount of work to do on the inside. They haven't really been aggressively kind of looking for tenants just yet. The good thing about that space, and you kind of see what the dynamics are. It's not a huge space. I think it's 35 or 3250 square feet. It is divided into 2 spaces. Small space is good for a small operation. If it was one big space, you're really limited in who the tenants could be. So there are 2 small spaces. If a bigger tenant, wanted to go in, fully capable of kind of taking that dividing wall down and kind of expanding the space. So they are flexible in that way. But I did express that there is a ton of interest in what the tenant in the commercial space is going to be. If we get an idea that they're ready to share, we'd love to hear from them. So we'll be keeping an eye on that.
So Tim, just if I may, on a moment, when I believe there's going to be some analysis coming beginning in next month on economic development and I think on the business side. One of the things I'd like, just thinking about that space and other spaces, like there's a lot of disappointment in the type of business that went into or is going into 131 Elliott. There was hope for, more, I think, store or cafe or restaurant, et cetera. One of the challenges I understand is the build-out cost for such a raw space. And I was curious whether there's any funding available, like grant funding, that could be made available to businesses that might be local businesses that might be interested in that space. And You don't have to give me an answer tonight, but.
No,
curious about that.
I think it's a great point, and these are kind of things because we've had such little commercial development, in town. We're sort of a little bit atrophied in our kind of experience with some of these, mass development, Office of Economic Development at the state level, have all sorts of opportunities, specifically for businesses. These are games that we haven't really been in, again, because of the lack of commercial development. But we do have, some more coming online, relatively soon. So I do think that there's stuff out there for that. I'll probably give a buzz to our old friend April Anderson, who is, lives and breathes in this world, can probably point me in the right direction. The other thing about, a place like 131 Elliott, and I was talking to Cheyenne about this, those are commercial condos, not dissimilar to the 36 Central units. Those are a little bit smaller commercial units. And, with a commercial condo, it's not just paying your rent, it's just like buying a house. And so I think that is a further limiting factor on the type of business, that you can do. It's good to own your space, obviously. But if it kind of affects the nimbleness of your business being able to get in, but that is what it is. We don't have a ton of control over that. But we will be checking out, opportunities for, potential funding for kind of, business development. And I think definitely, it may not line up with that planning process, but that's definitely something we'll look for as recommendations from that economic development planning process.
So Tim, along the same lines, if you could find out whether there are funders who are more apt to lend. I know in my business, when we were looking at commercial condo, they said there's very few comps. It's hard for lenders to think that those are something that if a business isn't able to pay it, that they're able to do, take it and do something with it. And so it's not like a home mortgage that way, or, so I'm curious if there are lenders who target small business that would, on the commercial condo market. So if that's something that we could ask in that process that's starting on economic development, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
And I have a question. Do we really, I'm a big advocate for small business, especially local and a non-chain. But do we really actually have any say as to what goes into that building? We might want to see certain businesses, but really it comes down to whoever takes a risk. It's a risk to run a business, and whoever is willing to take a risk, can we say to them, oh, sorry, we don't like your business, it's not our first choice? I mean, can we really have a say like that?
In this particular case of the ice house, and it's all governed by the comprehensive permit, and so I'll have to go and look and see if there are any stipulations in the comprehensive permit around, what uses are kind of allowed or not allowed. Otherwise, it probably defaults to the typical kind of business uses that are in our zoning, and as a general kind of matter, that's where the limits are, especially in the business district where business kind of zoning is operative. You say these are the types of uses that you can have, these are the types of uses you can't have. And if someone checks one of those boxes, there's really not a lot, to be said there. But I can double check the comprehensive permit for that ice house project and see if there were any kind of limits or recommendations or kind of guardrails for the type of tenant in there.
So Tim, I know like in places like Boston, they have Main Streets kind of programs where there's kind of funds or other tools, I guess, to encourage local business or small business. So to me, like a space that's 4,000 square feet or 3,000 square feet is not as likely for a local small business because it's a pretty big chunk to take on. So, in some ways, if we start to think about, again, in the economic development discussions, is there some package that I think maybe under the ARPA funding, there was some availability of funding that went to some local businesses. If there's anything like that that we can have that would help us with, attract the local business, that I know one thing, it has a lot to do with the landlord. Creditworthiness of a chain is a lot different than the creditworthiness of a startup, a brand new mom and pop. But if there's ways that, the town, in any way the town could help with that, I think we'd like to know.
Yeah, we'll definitely look into all that. And again, all of these questions are kind of the reason why we're engaging in an economic development planning process, because we haven't done a ton of thinking about this. We haven't had to, but I think now is a time where it's really appropriate to kind of ask these questions. So that's all going to be part of that process. That's all I've got.
Great.
Those were quick things, and we just spent 20 minutes on them. So
Great.
I'll
That's
be
great.
done.
All right. So now 7:30. We can now move on to citizens speak. And Tim, if you see any hands up, we'll look here as well. Is anyone seeing any?
No one in the room.
No one in the room. Okay. All right.
I'm not seeing any hands on Zoom.
Okay. All right. So we can go right into the new business discussion of the ADU provisions of Affordable Homes Act.
Meredith, we've got Zoe Mueller from UTL with just a really quick MBTA Communities update. Can we get her in and out?
Sure. Is that okay with the board members?
Sure.
Yep. Let's do that. That sounds good.
All right, I'm going to bring Zoe in and make sure she can share her screen. Hi, Zoe.
Hi there.
Hi there.
Sorry,
Welcome.
I muted the wrong thing. Let me see if I can share. Okay. So we just wanted to share with you a quick update on something we've done in the background in preparation for working with you on any revisions to districts. So this is the method that we have keyed up and plan to use for being able to surface to you all what the net new units are for each of the districts that we consider. So this isn't the actual calculations, but we wanted to show, get you aware of how we're planning to do it, so that when the time comes, there's a little bit less to kind of or get yourself oriented to all at once. There's kind of two steps to this process. And I do want to kind of, before getting into the weeds, just flag that this is kind of a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison. It's still very useful for our purposes, I think. It's conceptually valuable, but we are kind of comparing one thing which is about allowable development and the other which is about what's on the ground. So right now you have existing built units and you have what's allowed to be built, and those things are often different. So your existing zoning probably doesn't allow all of the things that are built currently. But we're going to kind of put that to the side for now. And I just want to kind of walk you through how we're planning to do this, which is comparing, like I said, the existing built units to what the new zoning that we're considering and evaluating together would allow. So what that looks like is starting with the new zoned unit capacity. And this would be coming from the state compliance model calculations. As kind of a footnote to that, it's important to understand that the state compliance model, because it's built to estimate multifamily unit capacity, which the state defines as 3 or more units for the purpose of this law. That means when you get multifamily unit capacity from the model, it's talking about only parcels where there are at least 3 or more units that are allowed on that parcel under the new zoning that you're developing. Because the way your zoning is written is sort of tuned well to that. In other words, you're also defining multifamily and only allowing multifamily at that 3 units or above. So it all kind of syncs up, but I do just want to flag that for awareness, that's kind of the data source for this. So things that are single unit and 2-unit parcels would not be represented in that number, that new zoned unit capacity. So that's our first step. New zoned unit capacity, take that number. And then we're going to subtract for each of those the existing built units on each of those parcels. And that's something that we're getting from your Town of Milton parcel data. So that's as accurate as it can be. That'll be much better than the state data that we were kind of starting from before for estimating this. So we have that kind of ready to go in the background. So we'll take that new zoned unit capacity, compare it to the existing built units on each of those parcels. And then we'll get a number that's net new allowable units. And in some cases, if, for instance, right now there are 2 units on a parcel, and under our zoning, under this kind of new, the 3A zoning that we're evaluating together, you would not be able to build 2 units. You'd get a net new number that's negative for that one. So in those cases, if the net new is negative, we're going to zero it out. We're going to say there's no net new units, but we're also not assuming that you're losing units, because that's unrealistic, right? Nobody's going to tear down an existing built development if they can't build it again or something better than it. So that's like the first set of steps, which is really just about at each parcel, are we getting a positive net new or a negative net new? If it's negative, we zero it out. If it's positive, we add it up. And then our second step is to take all of those individual parcel calculations and spit out a total number of new units that could be built under the new zoning within each of those sub-districts that we're considering. So that's, I wanted to surface this to you and give you the opportunity to ask any clarifying questions you have on this method. And also a little bit as a way to make clear that while it seems like quite a straightforward and simple thing, it is a little bit dependent on quite a few small details that matter a lot for the validity of the result. So it will take us a little time when we do run these numbers, but they'll get you something that's more accurate and reliable than what we were starting from the last time we spoke with you.
Great.
So with that, I think I'll pause and see if there's any questions or comments or anything on this.
Anyone?
No. So Zoe, I don't know if you heard me say at another meeting or if Tim shared with you that I did this type of analysis. I'm sure there's some mistakes in it, but I took the Elliott Street district from the Article 1, as we called it, in December. And I took the spreadsheet from the town parcel data, and I went through and categorized them as 1, 2, and 3 families. And then I calculated how many existing units were there and what the new potential was, and came up with a net new number. So I think I'm planning to show that hopefully one of these days, if not tonight, to the board. And I'd be curious to see if that's what you're talking about, because you know, I have an understanding of how that worked, and it was very informative. So
yeah, absolutely. That sounds like exactly the process that we're
Okay.
imagining going through.
Okay.
And, you know, assuming that we've made all the same assumptions, we'll get the same number. And then, you know, the difference is just if there's, you know, adjustments that you all want to look at making, we'll be able to kind of iterate that on that a little bit with you to kind of update, okay, well, with these new adjustments, you know, how has that affected the net new result? So that's basically we're expecting to do exactly what it sounds like you've done for the Elliott Street corridor under the parameters that we had at the end of 2023.
Right.
And then we'll look at adjustments or as well as the other districts to the extent that that's information that you want to make your decisions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zoe. Tim, did you have anything? Any questions also?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that update.
Great. And thank you so much for slotting me in at the start. And I hope you have
Yeah.
a productive rest of your evening.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, great. So jumping back to the discussion of ADU, I had asked Tim to send around for those who were not on the board, and we don't have to go into great detail tonight. I don't know if anyone has signed up for the September 10th.
I did.
I plan to sign up and attend that. And Tim, I know you're signed up, but I think that'll be good to hear. Really in looking through some of this language, I think there's a lot of language that we can actually work from that is in here. Obviously, those certain things that will be that we will need to take out or eliminate, such as the owner occupancy.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, certain items that we would need to change. Other things, I think, prompted me to have questions when we go into that forum on what will be allowed, we had in here, for example, a cap on the number of units. It's by right, but we limited that cap, certain things that, what can we do or what can't we do? Parking surrounding around the way I sort of like the way we had framed the parking language, that it's adequate parking. It wasn't putting a number on it, but with that, we can go into detail. I just didn't know if members, I just wanted to call your attention to it, and then also our temporary apartment bylaw, which we currently have, because we want to be thinking about how we transition and how we allow those who are in a temporary apartment to apply for a by right ADU situation. So,
One thing I was thinking, given that this will is allowed to go through a site plan approval process similar to other Dover Amendment uses, it makes me think that maybe we should focus on the site plan approval.
I was thinking that too. Yeah.
Zoning first.
Yeah.
Because even if something came in right when it's able to, if we're ready with site plan approval, at least it gets us the tools for approving it. And then, I looked through again from the language from a couple of years ago, and I think there's things in there that we can't do based on this law. So it would be, that's why I signed up also for September 10th.
Right.
I know Tim did, and if whoever can attend, we can share with the rest of the board. I think we'll have a pretty good idea what we can do. One thing that concerns me, though, is we have East Milton overlay zoning, we have MBTA communities. We're going to have site plan approval and possibly ADU.
It's going to be a lot.
And if that's for spring, when that's like
whole nother
enough,
night.
that's enough for a whole meeting just by itself.
I know.
And I'm wondering whether we should have conversations with the town administrator and the select board about a dedicated zoning town meeting. I mean, these are huge initiatives, and people have a hard time, especially members of a town meeting who have families, to take 2 weeks, in a row for a town meeting, focus on finance when they're talking about an override, and then to work on these kinds of zoning initiatives. So it's
I
just
agree, because I think we're going to need that site plan. We've talked about that and having that come online along with the other items, and I don't know how other members feel. And Tim, do you have clarification that that an ADU could be applied for prior to the regulations being finalized?
I don't have
HLC?
clarity on that.
'Cause that just doesn't seem to be process-wise make any sense.
Yeah, I think, and I did, we did have a meeting, myself, town council, the town administrator, and the building commissioner. It was really, everyone's takeaway from that was we're very much in wait and see mode in terms of, if and when the state is going to kind of come out with a process for unveiling their, proposed regulations. That'll be, very illuminating for everyone. And frankly, I think there's been not a lot of input from anyone in a position to have authority on this about what town should be doing. So I think that APA session will be good because folks are thinking very hard on this, and we'll be able to share some best practices and some ideas for how other towns are going to be kind of moving forward. But my take on this is, the law says you've got to allow an ADU. It puts in some pretty minimal, dimensional and kind of, other standards. I think it would be hard to argue that, on the 181st day, if we get an ADU application, that we would have any grounds to deny it. I definitely agree that there's a lot of work to do to kind of prepare for that day. I don't know how, whether or not regulations are in place, because the legislation, and if anyone has it up in front of them, I haven't pulled it up yet tonight. It allows the state housing agency to promulgate guidelines or regulations. I don't think that the language of the law requires those regulations to be in place. And so, again, I think once the sort of the 180-day period of, is someone looking at the?
No, do you want us to look it up?
No. I wondered if someone was.
I can try while you're talking.
I have it. The Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities may issue guidelines or promulgate regulations to administer this paragraph.
Yeah, so we're all very familiar now with the distinction between may and shall.
Yes.
And so, but again, to be charitable and I think realistic, I don't think the state's interested in 350 towns flailing about doing things that they have no idea what they're doing. So I do believe that, there is some priority on getting this regulatory process moving. I just haven't really heard anything, about it yet. So yeah, but I do think, addressing this via site plan, if that's the board, it really is going to entail a very thoughtful discussion about what site plan review means for the Goddard School versus what site plan review means for, a 900-foot addition on a single family house. And so I think, really thinking critically about what we want to get at a site plan review, is going to be important. But I think, we are allowed to review these under site plan review. I think, the board would be within its rights to recommend that, to town meeting as a zoning change. So I think that becomes, at the very least, I don't want to say a fail-safe, but I think that seems like the top priority would be, create a site plan approval process. Even if you don't have specific ADU zoning, you've at least got those parameters that are in site plan review.
Great. Good.
So my understanding about regulations is it really is a thorough process, that it's open to the public. Regulations just don't happen. That it takes quite a bit of time, and you have to reach out to all the towns to allow for feedback, and you have to, do certain things in, the Administrative Procedures Act. So I find it hard to believe that they're going to be able to do all of that in 180 days.
Well, the key is they don't have to, it sounds like.
It's like, it says or, but yeah, may and or. I know, but I know we have to prepare for the worst, but I just, this is a lot. Like, again, I said it before, it's a lot. And it would have been nice if they gave us a little bit more guidance on it. And my other question is, if we have certain setbacks already in place, do those same setbacks apply to ADUs? Is
So-
that something that we can continue?
So that's the question I had. Is it considered an accessory structure like a garage is, or would it be subject to primary structure setbacks? Tim, do you know?
This might be a building commissioner question. My take here is that it's called an accessory dwelling unit because it's accessory to the primary use. So it would be, subject to the accessory, structure setbacks.
So even if
Again,
it's attached, even if it's within the primary,
When accessory use is attached to the main, then it's required to meet the
the
main.
main,
So like
okay.
if your garage is attached to your house, it has to follow the primary setback, not the accessory structure
Okay.
setback.
But if you're turning a garage into, that is, and some of ours are grandfathered in where they're sitting right on the lot line, how is that?
In
That's the
the,
question about grandfathering on a
I
different
think
use.
at that point, you have to go get a variance.
Yeah.
That's what, I think
Alter
that's my understanding, is that you would go through the Board of Appeals for that.
and also, in the law, it's this, and we don't know this, we won't know this, I think, until, October, but it says about parking spaces, that no additional parking spaces shall be required for an accessory dwelling located not more than 0.5 miles from a commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, and bus station. So, and again, this is an argument we don't have the answer to right now, but if it's determined that we don't have those, then we will then be able to require a parking spot.
I think we had language in our previous ADU that said it needs to be adequate for the occupants. Meaning you have to be able to park it on site, and we're not telling them what number, and I don't know if this language, but in the last ADU, it had to be adequate for the occupants.
Yeah, and the discussion there
We
was,
don't allow street parking.
exactly, that was the question.
And
And
that
if you're
is-
close to the T or bus, then someone could decide that they're not going to, have parking, and that's,
Right.
I mean, the
least
property
one
owner
park-
is still in control here,
It says at least one parking space shall be assigned to the resident of the ADU. So they're saying they get one.
In which one are you reading?
In
This is the
what we
ADU
had the
bylaw.
previous.
Section 3?
And and there was also a maximum, no more than 5 vehicles
Yeah,
allowed.
for both.
You want to be able to have that.
Yeah.
And screening and protecting, but those, yeah. All right, lots of questions.
The question becomes if, you're going to see in that health report, there is a statistic about what percentage of Miltonites don't have cars. It's higher than you might think, actually. But again, you're going to take away green space. And if somebody doesn't have a car, why do you pave it? It's a question, I think it's something worth discussing in areas that are close to access to.
Right, that's why I think
Like Carol, the
adequate, the
trolley, et
term,
cetera.
that adequate for the occupant, for the,
Problem
Because
is-
some of these places, they don't have a lot of green space.
right.
But what happens if when your tenant actually decides they want a car and they get one halfway through the lease period?
You could add it, I'm sure.
You can what?
I would imagine you could go to and request to add the parking space, right? As long as you meet the other requirements.
So then you have to make sure your tenant doesn't bring home a car until, it sounds like a nightmare, but yeah.
Yeah, and I concern, what this is the impact on our building department, which is already overworked, so.
Well, there's more pavement in properties than you would think. Paving entire backyards because they don't. And if it's not necessary, I think it's a shame to do.
What about those pervious, they're like 2x2 squares, and you grow grass between them, but they have curbing so a car can go over them. You guys ever use those? I love that stuff. I
I've
see it
seen
for
them.
driveways and things.
Yeah,
Like when your garage is behind your house.
yeah, I've seen them.
Could we add that into the bylaw instead of either asphalt or gravel? Do some kind of pervious?
Yeah, we can.
I'm not sure if we can mandate what the pavement is, but I suppose we could encourage it. I guess these are all questions that we'll have to
Yeah, we'll have to go
raise.
over it, yeah, which we won't solve,
Yeah.
but I'm glad everyone's looking over this, and, it'll prompt questions, and whoever can go on September 10th
It's Zoom, right?
on Zoom.
Right.
And I think, Tim, was there one today? I think there was one this week.
was-
What
it was
was it
booked.
today? I think it might have been next week, actually.
I was going to do that one.
Is
but
it
it's
next
booked.
week? Or is it the 27th? Maybe it's the 27th.
The 27th.
It's the 27th? Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Because
signed
I
up
was
for
going to
that
try to
one.
do both because I thought there'll be different questions at different times, so. And do
The
you know
27th
those-
it's not allowed to, it's closed. The enrollment.
Yeah, they
for it's
opened up the
closed.
September 10th one because there was such great demand.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
All right, then we better get on
And
that.
just a random question, and maybe you don't know this, Cheryl, but when you just said that there are more people that don't have cars than we would think, is it broken down by age? Like, because I know I
It says
think.
households, it's not people, it says households. And I did a quick read, and I think
Yeah.
it said something, it was less than 20%, but more than, it was in the teens.
Yeah.
So, of households. So that's not people,
Yeah.
that's households. So that's, I think, probably more than most people would think.
It'd just be interesting to know, like, the age group. You know, my mother lived on her own in a household, and she didn't have a car. And I know our population here in town of older people, I think it's over 25%. The
I was going to say, does it
demographic.
include like Winter Valley and
Yeah.
Well, that-
Woody House
that-
and?
That
Winter
level
Valley.
of detail is not in what I read, but it could be in an appendix, or it might
I'd
be a
curious to
question
have
for
that
them.
broken out, yeah, separately.
But it might be in data that Tim has too.
Okay, good. Yeah, that'll be interesting to
But
read
the
through.
idea too is that older people could live in these is another thing to think about the mandate for the parking, because if they don't have a car, because they're at an age where they're not driving anymore, then why build more asphalt? So it is definitely,
Because the unit will turn over. And you're not going to rent to that one aged tenant forever. When they
well,
leave,
it may not
they-
be a rental either, it might be for a family member, but,
Family, if it's a family member, in-law or
so
something.
you're already accounting for the vehicles?
Yeah,
Well, if they don't have a car, and you know, so if you have a big enough driveway, and you have 3 spots, and you develop an EDU, but you know the person's not going to have a car, you just say, okay, this one's. Now I have 2 spots for my primary, and then I have 1 spot for the ADU, and nothing gets built, but you designate the spot, right?
I mean, a lot of properties have garages at the rear with long driveways. And so I really don't see for many properties that it's adding it, but for the occasional property where you would be adding asphalt, then maybe you don't.
good, all good questions. Okay, so anything else, Tim, that you wanted to add to this topic?
No, you know, if I hear anything, it'll be, you know, if anything that happens at the state level, they will broadcast kind of loud and clear to everyone through every means they can. So once I hear anything, if I do, you'll be the second to hear it.
Good.
And again, yeah, hopefully, if you need the link to the registration for that event should be in your inbox. If folks need it again, just shoot me a quick message and I'll get it to you. And yeah, stay tuned.
Now, and if we're going to concentrate on the site plan approval, I know you had sent us out a few samples, I think, didn't you, at one point?
Yeah.
Like when
You'd
we were,
sent-
yeah, you-
yeah, I have a little folder of them, so.
yeah. So is there, in your opinion, is there 1 or 2 towns that really have stood out? Just to save us some time, because if that is an important thing that we should be focusing on, maybe if we were able to look at the 3 best ones that you know of and highlight why they're good.
Yeah, I'll have to give that a little bit of thought. You know, I hate to say this because, you know, we all have a lot of shared interests and challenges, but every town is different in their site plan approval, unfortunately. There really are no guardrails out there. But I'll take a look at some things where I think we can pull some good stuff out of, and we can kind of start the conversation that way.
Okay, thank you.
I do know Lexington was one, Tim, I believe that you had sent. I know we had talked about Brookline doing extensive work on theirs.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Brookline, Lexington, Newton, you know, all
Yeah.
had elements that I think, you know, could be useful to us. And I think, you know, one thing that I think was specifically kind of interesting about, and I forget which town did it, was there was, you know, explicit, separate kind of site plan approval requirements for Dover Amendment uses. And it just would be helpful to kind of, if that's something that we can zero in on, in zoning, to use that as an example, could be interesting. But we'll give another look to that kind of batch, and kind of see if there's some good stuff that we can pull from other towns.
I also still believe that the research I did and the work that I did for the MBTA communities, for the site plan review piece, we should look at. I did look at a number of other communities, and from my years on the board, knowing what it would have been nice to have, or would have been good to sort of have at least a discussion about. But if you don't have it in there, you kind of have less grounds to kind of push on it. So a lot of it has to do with the submission requirements and also peer review. I mean, I don't know about now on ADUs are small, but on the other projects, like having a developer pay for peer review is something we ask for, but we don't always, it's not mandated, it's not stated in there. And so I do think I'd like to encourage everyone to look at that again. And I
Not
don't
to
think
make you do more work, but even I could do it. So if I went into that document, and because I haven't reviewed it, can I just cut and paste it into a new document as a standalone?
So I can go back to the one that I shared back when,
Yeah.
that it's because what went into Article 1 is a document, I think that was a PDF in the end, but it was a Word document at one point. Yeah, I think probably Tim has that too. And in which case, yes, then you would, right?
And Tim, there was one that you sent out, and maybe I had requested some materials, but it was a red line version. Was that our site plan? I'll have to go back and look at that. Do you
No, I think that
recall
was
something
another
being
community.
redlined?
Yeah, I'll take a look and see. We'll go back and
There was a
look
lot
at
of
that.
crossed out, and I thought, was that ours? And some things have been taken out, but, all right, well, we can talk offline on that and maybe see. And I have a stack of
Yeah, because
some.
if Cheryl has done the work, for Milton.
There was a lot of really good things in there.
There was, and we shouldn't, start looking at other towns if Cheryl's already.
One thing I didn't do, which I think Tim highlighted, which I think would be good to do, is to separate out Dover Amendment from business, because, and even ADU is going to be much smaller, so the kinds of things, like we're not going to require some of the same things that we were requiring for a bigger project, which was more the focus of the site plan. But, so we should look at it because it's very comprehensive. In that case, we could say, for ADUs, you don't need this. Or I do think businesses, some of them where it's very small, maybe we don't need the same things as something large, but maybe we need different things.
Yeah.
And I think
Like
that's the
we've
way
seen that from the
Lexington tiered
marketplace,
it.
right?
Yeah.
I think it might have been Lexington that actually had it tiered, or Newton, but it was small, small proposals versus larger.
Yeah, so
Based on square footage of the project?
They could just
I
call them
can't remember.
small, moderate, and large. But they did sort of have some categories of maybe square footage, acreage, but I'll have to go back and look too.
So one thing, too, when we think about these, like when Little Sprouts, I think it was, on Blue Hill Ave, they initially came in with a plan where the building was in one location, and there was lots of discussion back and forth, and that was going to take a variance, and so they said, okay, well, we're just going to have to put it where we don't need variances, and I put it really close to a house. And it's like, okay, was that the best outcome? Because of process, because of what's in the way the process works. So I'd like for us to think about that a little bit too, because we don't want to, sort of encourage designs that are less attractive or less impactful just because the process is easier. Right?
Okay, good. Okay, so I think at this point we can move on to, and if Tim, you want to tee this up, discussion of fiscal year 2026 budget priorities. And then we can discuss.
Yeah, so the budget season's starting a little bit early this year. We usually don't have this conversation until the fall. But the town administrator did want to get a little bit of a jump. Override talk is in the air. And I think, when that kind of thing happens, they want to start getting, a good feel for budget needs earlier rather than later. And so, just like always, Julia's salary comes out of the planning board budget that's set by contract. We have, level service, for, office supplies, postage, advertising, training. We sometimes kind of fiddle the dials on those based on previous years. The big thing is obviously the sort of the plans and studies appropriation. When we were doing MBTA communities, last year and the year before, a lot of work, was funded via grants. So we didn't spend as much of the planning board budget as we maybe ordinarily do. I think this fiscal year, that'll be a change. We're paying UTIL partially out of the planning board budget. We obviously have, 11 more months in the fiscal year to kind of figure out plans, project studies that the board may want to use some budgetary resources on. That'll all go into the narrative that I put together about kind of, that. The main thing is whether the board is interested in a supplemental budget request. And this is something we did talk about last year. We did put in a supplemental budget request of $40,000 for the purpose of pursuing, what we're calling phase 2 of zoning recodification. We did not get that supplemental budget request. That wasn't successful. Not that I think the board kind of pushed that project to the side, but the board's been very busy the past year. And so kind of that kind of, phase 2 of recodification, hasn't had a lot of work done on it. We can certainly give it another try. Or if there are other things that the board, would be interested in kind of, spending on above and beyond, the usual kind of level service appropriation, that's the kind of thing that, we would need to kind of figure out. And I don't think we need like a 100%, like this is what we're going to do and this is the exact project and here's the budget. But I need to be able to kind of credibly say, the board wants to do this. We need extra money to do it. Here's why it would be good. Easy thing would be same thing we did last year. I can just copy and paste. I'm not necessarily interested in doing the easy thing. I want to do what you want to do. But this is the season, and I think when we're talking about an override, there is the potential for not obviously we're not talking about a spending spree, but this is something where we can start to think about is the sort of level service appropriation that we've been getting for the past 6, 7, 8 years sufficient for the board's needs, or do we want to kind of expand that pie a little bit? So. I think I'm looking for kind of general ideas. I don't think the board needs to necessarily pin something down, with exactitude. But again, just something that we can credibly say, here is, a supplemental budget request, for this type of work. And then we can kind of talk eventually to the warrant committee, about that, and then possibly town meeting.
So Tim, do you think, what do you think you need? It's hard for me to really know, but I just know, as an employer, I always say to the guys, what do you need to do your job better? Is there anything you need? What?
Maggie, I appreciate that. I do. What I would say about that is actually, we're not necessarily wanting for anything. In terms of staff, we're good. This isn't a question of we need a assistant town planner. What I think I may be considering making my own supplemental budget request as a department head to my appointing authority. So I'm having that thought process right now. That would be kind of. And because here's what I'll say, what would be, and I don't want to say what would be helpful, but I think because the planning board budget is your budget, it is subject to what you want to do. It's not my budget. I do, buy, banker's boxes sometimes without coming to ask you guys to do it. I hope that's okay. We need them. But on the big ticket items, I'm not going spending the planning board's money without coming to the planning board, having a discussion in open session, and kind of, pursuing the planning board's priorities. And so I think I do appreciate the thought and the question. I do think that you should be thinking about what do you need? Because if I consider my department's needs, we are a lean operation. We do a big chunk of our work is staffing the planning board and then kind of managing the planning board's priorities. One thing that I have found in my several years here is that, and I've come to the board in some of these cases, is a little bit of money as sort of, seed money, or matching funds for grants. Where, I would never say town meeting, give me $100,000 so I can do my own plans and studies, but more along the lines of, if Mass Trails requires a match, being able to swiftly and nimbly kind of move on that, rather than, to be able to make a decision as sort of a department head. Those are thought processes that I'm having, but I do think that you should think about like, okay, in fiscal 26, what do we think that we're going to be kind of needing sort of more money for our own kind of priorities for? So that was a long way of saying, don't worry about me, I got it covered. But I do appreciate the question.
Well, because I know that, it is a unique position you're in because you report to the selectmen and that, but then you work alongside us. But, of course, we need you. We would be lost, obviously, without you. I don't, honestly, I don't know what really we need. I mean, I would love $1 million.
Yeah, I was gonna say it.
I would love $1 million to go out and buy a piece of property and do some affordable housing on it. But I don't think that's gonna. We'll get that.
You have some suggestions, and I haven't. Just a thought of something we've talked about too. That's.
Well, I do absolutely still believe that we should finish the work on the codification and to amend it such that it matches more typical zoning. In other words, you have more tables, and you may even have diagrams that help explain things so it's more user-friendly. I really think it's super important. And one thing that, Tim, I don't know if it would be helpful to you jointly with us, but, having a more searchable database for past permits. So like if you, Maggie, wanted to look up what was done on that site plan approval on Little Sprouts, you could go online and you could find everything in one spot, on that. So, as we don't have to kind of rely on people who've been here, on the board for a long time or on staff for a long time. So I think it would be beneficial to the staff and to the committee. And then as our representative to the Master Plan Implementation Committee, we haven't issued our report yet, but we're working on it. And it looks like we're likely to recommend some updates to it. So not a rewrite completely and not the whole level of process we went before, but some things are not covered very well at all, like sustainability, or the affordable housing challenges need to be updated, and traffic situations, which leads me to another, which is the MPIC requested some years ago now, before COVID, funding to have the traffic simulation model done, and it was done, but there's not. And now, like if we wanted to use it, it comes out of an engineering budget or some other budget to actually use it. And you really want the ideas to be able to use it. Like if you're going to change, like, a small project by itself may not trigger a lot, but if you're having multiple projects, like some people have asked, like, well, what if we do have a lot of new development coming out of MBTA communities, right? What does that do to the traffic situation? or even how can we make any improvements? So anytime we think about zoning and planning, traffic comes up. So is there something where we can have some funds that would go towards
Engineering.
engineering, who manages or who has the contract with Beta on this, to say that, you know, we have a certain amount of money targeted towards that analysis. So
Yeah, so incidentally, I do
And
have a
one more
meeting
item.
with the, I was just gonna say, I do have a meeting with the engineering department and Beta tomorrow.
Okay.
And so I'll bring that up and, you know, if that's something that's useful.
So like a planning board or planning department allocation that goes towards us being
Yeah.
able to have that independent look at traffic? Not
Yeah.
just, not
'Cause
relying
I
on peer review
think-
on large projects.
So would
I
that
think-
come under planning board, or does that go to the traffic committee?
Well, it's
Well,
something we would want. Go ahead, Tim, sorry.
Well, I was going to say there is DPW did this isn't at the I don't know if it was last town meeting or the previous town meeting because I know we spent some money. The DPW does now have a sort of, you know, specific line item for traffic engineering consulting, which I think would be, you know, maybe not the, but a place, you know, but I think Cheryl's point is well taken, that I think this has been kind of the drawback, because we have used the model, you know, in certain cases, but the drawback is it does cost money to run and run the reports, and, you know, where does that come from? And to be able to understand that on a consistent annual basis, I think would be helpful. So I'll bring that up with engineering and with Beta tomorrow, just to kind of see, you know, what they think is the most appropriate, you know, thing, and kind of pitch the idea of maybe planning board funding for that. Sorry to interrupt, Cheryl. I know you had one more
Yeah,
item.
no,
Can I
no
jump in
problem.
real quick? Does that
On
model, does that model allow you to see the effect of changing the direction of streets and putting a no left turn? Or
yeah.
this?
It
That'd be worth-
simulates where the traffic goes then.
That would be worth paying for.
Exactly, right? And the last thing was something I know, Tim, you mentioned several years ago. It's come up with the Neponset Esplanade Initiative. And it caught my eye in the health report, which is the social justice communities, is to do more planning work in that part of Milton, which some call West Milton, but I'll just call it that area near Tucker. And, you know, to really do some work with that community, so some funding for that. So those are my suggestions.
And then Tim was kind enough to provide some of what other towns have done for a preservation plan. And the Historical Commission has really felt like that's been sort of, historic preservation has not been, because of funding, been high on the list in Milton. And we're doing the lockup. We're starting to do some work on some of our oldest structures. But having a preservation plan is part of the master plan. And there were some excellent preservation plans that other towns have done. So we were going to try to find out what a consultant fee would cost to put that together, such as we'll be wrapping up our open space and recreation plan, but then maybe we could go on and then initiate a preservation plan and a consultant. And a lot of the materials that were in those are surveys of historic properties, which we already have. Like, we already have a lot of that material, which could go into some of those reports. But, you know, doing some additional.
So Meredith, with that, then it would help the CPC, right?
Well, exactly. That's what. Then it gives guidance to, okay, this is what we should apply for. This has been part of a preservation plan supported by the Planning Board, the Historic Commission, and.
And this will be a joint effort between the two?
It could be. I mean, if we want, it could be anything we wanted. But I think having a plan in place would be helpful, and then we could collaborate. You know, I think together on the project. So
I think that's a good idea.
there's some great national consultants that have done work in a lot of New England towns that seem to be the go-to people. So maybe we could get some costs. I still have those, Tim, and maybe Cheyenne could do a little research to find out what other towns have paid to have those done.
Yeah, we'll definitely. Yeah, we can definitely take a look at that. Cheyenne, please write that down.
We can get it in the queue, to start working
Yeah.
on. Great. Good.
So one more thing.
So I'm looking at kind of my emails. The finance department does want, budget templates back by the end of the month. That being said, I only got the budget template on the day of our last meeting, so this is the first time we've had a chance to talk about this. So I'm going to try to work on this, try to work on a narrative. Kind of, I want to submit something in a provisional form just so that I'm being a good boy and handing in my homework on time. But I will talk to the town administrator and just let him know, like, we toss a lot of ideas around. We want to make sure we get the numbers right. So we'll figure that out. But this we may need to have a follow-up conversation at the next meeting just to kind of finalize some of this stuff.
Sounds good. We can put that on the agenda again for next week. Okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So mine is more towards MBTA and UTIL. And when we're deciding districts and when we're deciding where to put units, I mean, I may have mentioned this before, it would be great to have UTIL actually in the room running the model. And like if I say, look, how many units can we get on 701 Randolph Ave? If they were here and they just hit the button and told us. Is that something, I mean, I know we have to eventually start paying these guys instead of we're gonna run out of grant money.
My sense is it's not as easy as that. It takes time. But Tim, you've worked with them a lot more. What's your sense?
I think that there is a world in which that exercise, can work. But I do think that it does require some initial kind of prep work in terms of, here. So the thing about the model is there's two sets of inputs. And Meredith, maybe we can just start that agenda item. 'Cause
I'm approaching it more towards the budget, but I
Budget
guess
process.
if I'm going.
We need money for it, is
Yeah,
you're
and
saying.
how
Well,
much are we gonna need?
I mean,
It's a
so-
short-term
so-
ask for this year, but I think it's important.
No, well, so the board has, so like I said, there's in the realm of, I think, $20,000 of grant funds still kind of outstanding here, and then the entire, $50,000 budget for fiscal '25 that the board has. I wouldn't be worried about paying UTIL. I think the board has plenty of money. I think the board will have money left over to do stuff. So I wouldn't be concerned about that. We're kind of focusing more on fiscal '26. So definitely appreciate your concern about their time and everything, but I do think the board still has, plenty of money.
So,
To,
and Tim, that would include doing a fiscal analysis that would allow for more than 10% affordability with MBTA communities? I think that was 20
It might.
grand that we had allocated last year for that. I'm not.
yeah, I'll have to go back and double check what the figure that
40 rings
MAP
the bill.
provided for us.
I think that was
Yeah.
for more extensive, for more extensive
Yeah, let me,
work that was-
I'll make a note to double check on that,
And just don't forget, we may be doing, I mean, we're entertaining 3 plans now, right? 25%, 10%, and now the statute. I'm just concerned that we're gonna run out of money. That's
Yeah, so the other thing is the Master Plan Implementation Committee did get 30,000 in this current fiscal year budget, which we wanted to do in case we needed some for helping with the library. And if something else came up that those funds could be useful for. So it may be that some of those funds could be available depending upon, how things go. So I'm not going to commit the committee, to that suggestion yet, but I just mentioned maybe.
Okay. So I think we can move into MBTA then, if everybody is ready. And so I was looking over our updated spreadsheet, which Julia printed out.
Meredith, can I just finish my point from earlier? I didn't want to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Be in order.
Sorry.
Just to address Jim's question, the two inputs in the compliance model, the one that takes a ton of time and effort, well, not a ton, but time and effort, is the geography, right? Because it involves kind of grabbing parcels and inputting them. So that's something where you really do want to have a good idea what the geography is, so that the consultants can kind of prep that and kind of get the model in a place where every iteration we're talking about the same geography. The other inputs are the numbers, setbacks, height, FAR, all of that. Those, are just a matter of typing numbers into a cell. That being said, you do want to make sure that you have a model spreadsheet that is kind of ready to go, and you're only working on kind of discrete, factors at a time instead of kind of changing everything wholesale. So I think that could be an exercise in kind of fine tuning on the margins. I think the bulk of the exercise of iterating and kind of getting into a kind of good position, I think the board really does, and because that's the stuff that's informed by values and priorities and less by numbers. But I do think that if you get to a point where like you're fine tuning, you're trying to grab units here, grab units there, there could be an exercise where we're kind of in a working session together with UTL. So definitely possible, but I wouldn't have that be the first step because it would be time consuming and probably not very productive.
Yeah, because there was a gentleman who was on Raj or someone who was manipulating in real time.
It was neat.
But we were to a point where we were asking specific questions, and I think, once we get further down the line. So we have gone through, we've ranked sort of all the districts that we had previously discussed. We had discussed going back and going over them to make sure that we were being consistent. I don't know if we would like to do that at this time, or if you would like to go through the work that you did, because I think this might be a good time to do that, Cheryl.
Yeah, do you mind, I did look through it. I don't think, for me anyway, there were a lot of things that I think that we hadn't been consistent about, but there's a few. So what do you think
Sure,
about
we can do that.
taking like 15 minutes for those?
Great.
So the yellow, Tim, I may have highlighted. And I was looking at the line 4, so A.2, allowed height is comparable to existing multifamily in parts of town excluding 40B projects. And on the Blue Hills Parkway, we gave it a 5. And I'm wondering why we gave that a 5, because we're allowing 2.5 stories here in the Parkway. And other comparable multifamily is higher than that. So does anybody remember why, like we gave Elliott Street 3 and we gave East Milton 3, and I'm wondering why we wouldn't have put a 3 on the Parkway?
Because you know what I think we did? I think we took the existing the 2 and 3 families that exist there, and we were saying that it.
But there's still 2.5 stories. This is height. This one's not
Right.
size. Those,
Height.
they might be 3, but they're certainly, so let me just say, for example, like
Typically, they're lower.
the other multifamily in town is 4 to 5 stories.
Right.
Right? And so I just feel like we're doing 2.5 stories here, we're doing 2.5 on Elliott, and we're doing 2.5 in East Milton. Seems like that should be a 3. Tim, do you remember any reason why that would be a 5 rather than a 3?
I don't remember any reason.
All right, so I'd like to suggest a 3 there for consistency.
And this is A4.
This is on A.2.
Sorry, 8.2.
Give me half a minute. I had to change my password when I logged in, so I'm just getting back into OneDrive.
Okay, all right. Sorry,
and I'll bring
I'm
it up.
looking at a print version here.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you could pull it up, Tim, on the screen too, just for those watching,
All right.
to
Working
be
on
able
it.
to follow through. Yeah, thanks.
I know we gave Mattapan Station a 3 because there were some single families in that district, and we were making that much higher. And I think Milton Station East, I don't recall, also that's circled for me too, like why did we do East? And maybe it had to do with the mix of scale of buildings in that district, or in that area.
So what am I doing on Blue Hills Parkway?
Well, I'm kind of thinking Blue Hills Parkway on line 4, or principle 8.2 to change the 5 to a 3. And that would make it consistent with the other 2.5-story districts of Elliott Street Corridor and East Milton.
I
And
would be okay with
then-
that. That's-
And then go back to Milton Station East and ask why that's a 3 when we're making Milton Station East is, I don't have, do we have that at East at 6 stories? I have to find my paperwork on that.
I think we were really focused on extra space storage in that.
Exercise
Yeah,
storage,
but we have to think about the whole district. It's not just extra space, right?
Which
not
would
much more than
also
extra
be,
space. Is there
88
I'm
Wharf.
trying to get to the-
88 Wharf would also be.
Yeah,
6
so
stories.
it's 88 Wharf, which is 6 stories. So I'm thinking it should be a 5, is what I'm thinking, instead of a 3, because we're matching up with what's there. Oh, I know why. It was those small mill buildings, Meredith, I think that you picked up. So what
those
about
were-
making it a 4? Because that's such a
I'm good
small
with-
part of it. That, my
good with that.
recollection now? Okay. A 4,
That
good?
seems-
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
So you want to do a 4 on
Milton
A2?
Station East. Yeah. Then the next line down, 8.3, allowed building sizes comparable to existing. And we have under Granite Ave South and NA, but there are buildings there. So I thought we should give this a numerical value of some sort.
We do?
Where
A3?
A3.
I must have an old sheet, I'm not seeing an 8.
Line 5.
Oh, there you go, way out there, okay.
Line
sorry.
5, yeah, sorry, and column K. So I don't think it needs to be a high number here, but it needs
Yeah, I
to
was
be a
gonna
number.
say, like a 2
Like a 2 is good with me.
instead of an 8.
Yeah. All right, next line down. So line 6, 8.4. Allowed building sizes comparable to multifamily in parts of town, excluding 40Bs. And we have it only as a 3 in Milton Station East. And again, seems to me, yeah, other parts of town aren't 6-story, but it seems like that could be a 4 instead of a 3. Is everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. And then keep on that same line going over to Granite Ave North, which is column J. We have an NA there. And I don't think that's right. So the building size here is also allowed to be 6 stories. So I think that should be a 4 because we're allowing 6 stories in other parts of town.
I'd call it a 5, it's the only building there, right?
Okay, if you want to call it a 5, I'm okay with that too. And I was going to suggest a 5 for Granite Ave South. At 4.5 stories, we have lots of 4.5 for our
We
multifamilies.
ran into a problem there with the neighborhood across the way, right? The Cortland
Yeah,
Circle
but we're
neighborhood,
just comparing it to other parts of town now.
not the
We've
neighborhood.
covered the neighborhood in a different line.
Okay.
So I would give Granite Ave North and South a 5.
Well, 4.5 stories, that's almost,
That's what we have at Milton Hill House. We have at 131 Elliott, 36 Central.
I know, but town-wide, most of the town is like 2 stories,
I know, but
right?
we're only comparing it to multifamily in other parts of town. We're not comparing it to the bulk of the town. In this particular
you're
line,
suggesting a 4?
I suggested a 4 for North, Jim said a 5, but on South, I suggested a 5. Because North is a 6-story allowed, and South is 4.5-story allowed, in my recollection. Let me see.
Yeah, I'll have to renege my 5 if we're looking town-wide. This is-
Yeah, well, it's because we
with
don't
4 on that
have, we
one.
don't have a lot of multifamily in town, so we're comparing it to where we do have it, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, I'd go 4 on North and 3 or 4 on South. But that's just me.
Well, North is 2 Granite. That's,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so that's, I
It's okay to
think,
be 5.
that's okay to be 5.
So when I did this is from my presentation at town meeting, and I did this chart which compared, you know, North and South, and also Milton Station East and West. And so at 4.5 stories, you've got 131 Elliott, Milton Station West, Granite Ave South. At 6 stories, you have 88 Wharf, Milton Station East, Mattapan Station, and Granite Ave North. So we were kind of looking at there's certain areas that could go 4.5 and certain that could go 6 in comparison. So we didn't go higher, and one place isn't like 7 or 8 when we didn't have it. So Meredith, what did you suggest for north then?
I'm fine with the 5 for north.
Okay, and then on south, you guys want to go 4 instead of 5?
So if you
nothing?
say 4, then if you give it a ranking of 4, you're saying that it's okay for it to be 4 stories.
What we're saying is it's comparable. We're not making an assessment of whether it's a good idea or not. We're just saying it's comparable to multifamily in other parts of town. These are meant to be objective that way. Just like somebody might not like Milton Hill House being 4.5 stories either because there's single families next to it, but it's there, right? So, we make a comparison that we have it someplace else that's next to single families.
Right, and we do have it in other areas. I think what this is not meant to be, in my opinion, when we come out, however this comes out, doesn't need to be, okay, we have to do 4 stories because
exactly, yeah.
So we can still say East Milton is very different from the Lower Mills, area. And
you can still make
or
a
other
decision
areas of
that
town.
we think things need to be adjusted. But this
Right.
is just this particular criteria.
there are
Is it
some, the problem is there's not a lot of multifamily housing in East Milton Square. So
This was trying to get at the fact that somebody made a suggestion, maybe you go 8 or 10 stories on 2 Granite. And we don't have that anywhere. So we would have that as a different number. But these heights are in town, so we would give it a
do
certain
have it
number.
in other areas. But those other areas are more appropriate to have those heights.
Right.
So if you want to do 5 for north and 4 for south,
Yeah, I feel a little bit better at that.
okay,
Yeah,
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that too.
Then the next one, 8
Did you get that? Okay.
The next line, there aren't too many of these, so
Yeah.
I said
Yep,
15
no,
minutes,
that's
but there's these few where we didn't fill them in that I thought was important to discuss. 8.5, allowed building typology is comparable. So the typology here in north and south allows for, different scale of buildings. And we really don't have the typology, so I just didn't think we should leave them blank. So a 1 for both of them?
Say 1 for both.
Yeah.
I mean, on north, I mean, Cheryl, we can talk about typology.
I know.
There's a tallish building there right now.
Right.
We're talking about tall. I mean, I wouldn't give it a 1, 2, 3, maybe.
I agree with you because you look at it, an office building is a different typology. However, it is a big building. So
3?
I would give it. I'm okay with a 3 there.
But I think on south, I mean, definitely. I mean, there's stuff there, but I mean,
It's not like, yeah.
I think a 1 is
Slow.
appropriate on that
So
one.
3
Okay,
and a 1.
A 3 and a
Okay.
1.
Good, Tim, thanks.
Next line, 8.6, required open space is comparable to existing. We gave it a 5 on north. I think 5 on south too because we have a lot of open space required. And I actually, some time ago, I did check it, and it's what's existing is 40%, and so this would, that's what we
5.
require, a 5. All right, and I think there's only one, or maybe one or 2 other ones. So if you look at line 20, C.4, this is in the disincentive teardowns line or category. District has parcels and/or buildings of adequate size to allow additional units without demolition. And we have a 1 for Granite Ave North. Now, there's a lot of parking required for office. You could actually add, somebody could do a mixed use in some idea and add a residential building here and have less parking. So I actually think a 1 is not right here. I think this should be like a 3. You guys agree?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Then down to the line 52, under H, encourage mixed use, do not lose business use opportunity. We have a lot of NAs in here. So I thought we should just change those to numerical to be consistent.
Mattapan Station.
Yeah, because we have some numbers thrown in and NAs. So mixed use required, I think we just give it a.
Where are we talking about?
If you look at
Oh, all the
line
way down here.
row 52,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, H1. Actually, it looks like different numbering. So, because I got rid of some, sorry. So it's H1,
58.
yeah, H1.
Yep.
So I just think the NA should be zeros, right? It's either 5 or 0.
Yeah.
And the same thing the next line down, NA should just be zeros. And then, does everyone agree with that? Okay, and then under I, affordable housing potential, I.2, we have some NAs thrown in there.
Give me a sec.
Sorry, Tim? Yep.
So we put zeros in on H, on 1 and 2, all the NAs
Yes.
across the board.
Okay.
Then on I.2, district includes existing affordable housing. We have NA. So otherwise, we have ones and numbers. So should this be 0 or 1 instead of NA?
Well, 0 would mean numerically nothing, right? So it won't
Yeah.
affect when we
So
tally the columns.
zero.
That was
Yeah, so
Sean's
I guess
point.
they
Yeah,
should be
just-
zeros, right?
yeah, zeros for all the NAs.
So then the next I.3 and 4, all those NAs would be zeros as well.
Yep.
And there's 2 more that are similar under J, the J.1 and J.2. I think just turning the NAs into zeros. And that's all I have.
Yep, that's good. Yeah, that cleans that up, but that's,
It's consistent, so if we can sort of come back to it. Now, if we look at other districts, and I feel like we've been consistent with it. I mean, I think everybody should take a look if you have time to look at consistency, but I looked at it today. This is what I picked up.
we do have at the bottom of
I think we can tally.
E8, we have ends.
Sorry, which one?
Very bottom under, oh, but do we sort of started,
These-
oh,
we're not-
parcel
we're not-
sizes?
the-
Yeah, those are, we moved out the.
Those are off,
Yeah.
okay.
We
The
can tally the
totals-
columns
Those
without
are
those.
tallies
Yep, okay.
of
Totals,
parcels,
yeah.
yeah.
All right. Yeah, and we can all look over this again and just
Yeah.
check in on that. All right, so Cheryl,
Okay.
I've been carrying your presentation to every meeting. So I think it's
Thanks,
time.
Meredith, okay.
Yeah, just so you know, I've been very faithful and
Thank you. Tim, do you have it? Or,
Maybe I should
Slide
have
deck.
got a copy of it.
I have it. It's in I'll have to dig it up.
I mean, if you want, if you give me screen share opportunity, I can
Yeah,
share it.
you can share, so
Okay.
you should go ahead and feel free to do that. I gotta step away for a quick minute. I'll be right back.
Okay. I think this is it.
I think this will be perfect timing, dude.
Okay, so again, this is just the districts. This is purely thinking about what was in the end of the year, the 25%, and kind
Where
of
we had left off.
where we left off, and kind of thinking about first the Elliott Street corridor and then maybe tinkering with it, and then also some other potential districts. So the thing I think that people asked about a lot was how can the Elliott Street corridor really be only plus 70 net new when the zone capacity was 480? And, you know, it had to do with what Zoe spoke about earlier, which was they were using residentity instead of looking at a parcel by parcel. And so I actually did look this winter at a parcel by parcel, which did take a little bit of time, but I thought it was worthwhile. So I also categorized the parcels by size, thinking if we want to tinker with it a little bit, we could think about it on a parcel size basis. So then I used the data and put in also which ones, how many were one families, two families, and threes, because that would give us a more accurate count of our existing. So you can see that there's 142 single families, 18 two families, and 0 three families in the parcel sizes of 7,500 and up. So remember, the 7,500 was our minimum lot size that was allowed to be used for, the zoning was allowed to be used for. So the total number of existing units based on that is 178 with the zone capacity of 480. The net new is really 302 and not 70. So is that, everybody understands how I arrived at that? Yeah, it really would have been, right? But it did take some time to go through and
good
do.
job.
So
Should be paying
thanks.
you.
And I have a spreadsheet, you know, to back it up. But that was really enlightening, I think, to me, and I hope to everyone else. And so then I said, well, one of the things that we heard a lot was that there was too much density in Granite Ave. And part of, you think about what's driving that density is the density, the lower density in the Elliott Street corridor. And if we think about, well, if we just lowered the density on Granite Ave without changing anything else, or we added another district, we wouldn't be meeting the density requirement of 15 units an acre because we're adding land area. So then I said, well, it's worth us looking at whether we can get a little more unit capacity in the Elliott Street corridor, and how might that happen. You know, another way to do it is just swap out, you know, the Granite Ave for another location, whether it's Randolph Ave or something else. But everybody's going to have concerns about, you know, how many units are on one particular parcel or two parcels that are large, right? So it seemed worthwhile. All of this obviously is going to take community process to run through, but this is just analysis. It's not necessarily a recommendation at this point. So well, I thought one thing to look at to do that would be to reduce the minimum lot size from 7,500 to 6,250. So if you did that,
Capturing more.
you gain 64 parcels,
Right.
not changing your land area, but you're getting 64 more parcels, which is 40% increase in the number of parcels. And then another thing that you could look at, and they don't have to both be done, but
And you don't have to go in a wider area, which is what we ran into. We were having to take over more acreage to get the number of units to bring it, so. Yeah.
so the other thing that you could look at is allowing more than 3 units on larger parcels. And you don't have to do both, and you could do one or the other, but those are the two things. The third thing is expand the district. I didn't look at that because it's harder. That requires the compliance model, which
Yeah, and we didn't,
which I didn't.
and I think we didn't like that when we did that. It was
Yeah,
just-
originally, yeah. So you can see that in those 64 parcels, 50 of them are single family, 12 of them are 2 family, and 2 of them are 3 family. So it's kind of interesting that
It's capturing more 2 and 3 families too.
yeah. The other thing is that's interesting to me is that we have 3 families on 5,000 square foot parcels, and we have 3 families on parcels that are less than 5,000 square feet. And we're talking about, in this case, 3 units per parcel, right? So in this scenario, let me go now to the next. So those additional parcels are in orange at the bottom. And you would pick up an additional zone capacity of 186 with a net new of 112. So that, everyone good with that so far? Okay. Then this one looks at, well, if you did 10,000 square feet and above, you could allow 4 units instead of 3. And that would add a zone capacity of 87, and all of that is net new. Then if you did a tiered, where you allow 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 units, depending upon lot size. And you can see it here. And I'm going to show some examples that we have already, which sort of match up with this. But if you did this, it would be 174 of additional zone capacity, and all of that is net new. That's not on top of the one before it, obviously, because that's included in here. So you can, instead of thinking about how you might get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units, you don't have to think of it as one building. You can control the scale by requiring it be in multiple buildings, is one way to look at it. This little diagram here came from an architecture firm that was addressing what's called the missing middle. I think Tim talked about that in one of his early presentations. So you could control the size of these by capping the floor area ratio and allowing for 4 units, 2 unit buildings, which is actually, if we look at it, I'm going to show you some examples. What we have is just that they're separate parcels. That's what we have in a lot of parts of this district. And then on 5+ units, you could have a maximum of 3 units per building, which is what we would have under the current. And then you could say, okay, well, maybe by special permit, you could change that so it could be 1 building. So that would require, a little different process. And I don't know if that's allowed. Hopefully it would be, but this is a way to get, sort of infill of similar sized buildings rather than new buildings, new small apartment buildings that look out of character in the neighborhood. Here's another example of diagrams of how that could work, where it looks pretty similar facing the street, but you have a little bit more built up within the parcel itself. And if we went this direction, what use of funds that we could have is some kind of diagramming like this. So you're really starting to look at design and having some more design guidelines that could match up. So just to think about, well, do we have this already, these kinds of buildings already here? So this is a 3-unit example on Blue Hills Parkway, a 3-family on a 7,500 square foot parcel and 17 units an acre. So this is what we have, and what we had, in our Article 1 in the fall, right? We were allowing for this type of structure. Then if you look at, well, what do we have for 4-family? This is one on Clapp Street on a just over 10,000 square foot parcel. And you can see it really is 2 parcels that are combined. So if at 10,000 square feet, and what I showed you earlier in the chart, if we allowed for 4 units on 10,000 square feet, this is an example of what that might be. There's another example of 4 units on Holborn Street. That's a little bit larger parcel at 12,000 and change. And you can see it's 2 parcels that were combined. And then you have this on Thatcher, which is detached units, but it can give you an idea of 4 units on 10,000 square feet. That's 16 units an acre, so within this requirement. So these are all different typologies on different shaped parcels, but we have them in town.
So what? For single families?
Yes, they're small. This is what they are. And you can see they're, 2 of them are less than 1,000 square feet. And the other 2 are 1,100 and 1,200. They don't have frontage on a street because they were built in 1890. A lot of these were built before
Yeah.
the zoning was
Yeah.
passed.
No,
So
no,
we
I get
changed
it.
our zoning so we can't build these things anymore. But we used to build some of these things this way, the way that we might do it under this MBTA zoning. So this is an example of what we have a lot of are 2 families on 5,000 or plus, a little bit more size lots, which is really 4 units on 10,000 square feet, right? So that, again, back to that suggestion that over 10,000 square feet, we might change it to allow 4 units. It's not atypical. Now, these both have frontage on the street, and whether a parcel will lend itself, to adding another structure, you wouldn't be required to have frontage for both structures. You would just be required to have frontage for one. And then even on Blue Hills Parkway, where these are 5,000 square foot lots, and if you have 3 of these lined up together, and let's say this was one parcel at 15,000 square feet, you've got 6 units. So why not have something which allows for 6 units on that size parcel when we have examples of this in this vicinity? We also have a single structure with 5 units on Griggs Lane, which you can see here. It's a larger site. It has a lot of ledge.
I walk-
Lot.
Yeah.
It's a very nice lot.
Yeah.
There's nothing around it.
And you have 7 units in this structure on Fairfax Road. This is just about a 17,000 square foot parcel. So it comes out to 18 units an acre, but there's adequate parking and there's open space. And so these units, I don't know the unit sizes, but I'm guessing they're not large, given that
Pretty small.
there's 7 units in less than 6,500 square feet. But this might be something that someone would choose to build, under the zoning. And so it's not, and this fits right in with single families and 2 families in this neighborhood. I had to search it out because I saw that we had that, and I searched it out. So that's my analysis in the Elliott Street corridor. This now goes to some potential different locations. So before we do that, does anybody have questions? You want to have some discussion about that Elliott Street corridor?
Did you look at going down to 5,500 square foot lots or 5,000 square foot lots?
No, because we heard from neighbors in those areas who felt like they wouldn't allow enough open space. And if you look at it, if you go back and you start looking at that, if you said, okay, you wanted to get, how many units did you want to get away from, let's say, Granite Ave North, which had what, 530? And if-
701, I think. Oh, between the two was 701, right?
Well, I'm just talking about,
South, yeah, 530.
north. I think north is isolated enough that
Yeah.
if you're thinking about, so if we kind of go back to, I think this one has the total numbers. If you said, okay, how much more might be reasonable to add to, I mean, if this was purely just take some off of Granite Ave and put some more in this Elliott Street, and this could potentially be Blue Hills Parkway too. I didn't do Blue Hills Parkway, but I think it should be looked at. But it already has a different density allowed there, and it's not driven by 3 units. So, if you did, so now you're chipping away. If you did some of this, right, you're chipping away at that 530, and so.
And I think we can
I don't think
still
you-
look at how Elliott Street corridor is, how it's compromised, I mean.
The boundaries?
The boundaries, because I am thinking if we did this
You want me to go back
on
to
like Cliff Road and
And Maple Street.
North.
There's a little bit
Well,
more
no,
Maple.
in the Cliff neighborhood, off Elliott behind, like Allen Circle, some of those. I think that area would risk demolition to try to get, because those are larger lots, and to get the number of units that you would be able to get, you would be incentivized to tear down those properties. Where I think along some of Elliott Street and the Blue Hills corridor, you have really big property, like what you were showing, really big structures right now that could house it without being torn down. if that makes sense.
So one thing I think, you know, we could look at is if we said, yeah, we like some of this, we should actually look at the parcel, you know, look at the properties. And because we
Does it
want,
work?
does
Yeah.
it work on the ground? I mean, this is just a numbers thing, right? And before, you probably all recall that I did some of that, looking at it on the ground to feel comfortable about 7,500 square feet. I feel like we would want to do the same with these adjustments. I think going to 4 is kind of like, to me, that's like, I don't think that
4,000 or 4 units?
4 units on these larger is not a
huge,
is not
yeah.
a big change.
Not
So
that bad,
if I'm looking at this, I would say, you know, maybe that 6,250 square feet on the parcel size might not be too bad. And, you know, going to 4 units, this one, you know, 4 units on these larger parcels, that, you know, we can see that that's pretty consistent with a lot of what's there. If you consider that there's 5,000 square feet with 2. So we can't allow it 2 unit, but by saying we can allow two units on a larger parcel, we're basically repeating what we have.
In some areas, I think that's a good point.
And so if you did 87, let's just say, for example, plus 112, you're about 200. And so if you took 200, let's say, off of Granite Ave South, then
Makes a huge difference.
makes a huge difference, and that's a sort of a reasonable thing to look at as an alternative to what we had before,
Right.
in my opinion. Then the other way, if we feel like maybe there's not support for that in the LA Street corridor, then I was thinking, you know, we look at another location. But
Before we do that, wouldn't it be better to build one structure like a 4-family instead of two families?
I just think
You
scale-wise,
would achieve more open space. And if you capped it at 2.5 stories, I think
well, that's a possibility. I mean, these,
But if it's an already existing structure, it might be really expensive to,
yeah, if you already
Well, I'm
have a
thinking-
two-family,
well, you wouldn't tear it down, you would just add on to the back. One of the
Or add
benefits
on.
to Elliott Street is that a lot of the houses are either on or within the setbacks. So if you tore them down, you'd have to recenter the property. So you wouldn't want to tear them down as a developer. You'd leave it where it
Right.
is.
you're saying just
So
add
it-
on to that, not,
Just add on to that, and that
do
and
it.
it would.
I mean, I guess what you're saying is instead of making this requirement here, I guess it kind of depends, like, you know, some people get concerned about the scale of the buildings. A lot of people, that's the biggest thing we heard was that scale of buildings. So what I wanted to suggest is one way to address that is to say, you have a 2-family, you can build another 2-family. Because that's one of the things I really wish we could have done under the guidelines, is to say you have a single, you can build a 2-unit somewhere. But the way it's structured, you have to have a 3-unit building, otherwise it's not considered multifamily. But my understanding is that two-unit buildings on a parcel is considered multifamily. And so the other thing it does is you don't have to worry about bringing the old building up to code. I mean, the new energy code is, if you connect them, and even for fire ratings, it's just, in my opinion, as an architect, you know, it's just clean to do the new one. But,
Yeah,
you know,
I think
this
you'd
is
achieve more open space if you did one larger one.
potentially.
Open space is really the drive.
Potentially. But
Yeah.
you're still going to have 40% open space. I mean, this doesn't change the open space requirement. I mean, maybe it's not, maybe we look at 40%, but 40% seemed to be a good number because it was pretty consistent with that neighborhood.
40% open
trying to
space,
do-
and then a driveway to get back there. You're not going to
Yeah,
have
so
the,
what we're
you're not gonna
trying
have the
to do,
space.
remember, is to take advantage of the lots that are larger. We kind of tailored the zoning on that 7,500 square feet, and if you look at it, there's 65 lots that are 7,500 to 10,000 out of 142. So we're kind of giving up a lot of land in the rest of those lots by limiting it to 3.
That's what makes it so nice, is that you have that open space on those, a lot of space. I mean, what we're not looking at is the new ADU bylaw now, right? So now all of a sudden, we cap it at 6,250, but then it doesn't matter because the guy next door has 5,000 square feet. He can do a 2-family or a 3-family, or even more if he goes to get a special permit. So all this limitation of we got to stop at 6,200 is going to get blown out of the water when the ADU bylaw hits.
The
Which is really,
the ADU
which is why we should go down to 5,000 or 5,500, because it's going to come anyway,
well,
and it's going to be by right.
yeah, but you're not here where you can't limit it to a size of 900 square feet per unit. Like that has a different ownership allowed, it has a different size requirement. I mean, I don't,
So if you're building these, then the ultimate affordability would be to build a 900 square foot unit and rent it out cheaper.
it depends. Like if you can't, I mean, if you're a property owner, you're going to have the ADU option. The question is that more attractive than the MBTA communities? I can't answer without really thinking about it further. I'm just trying to sort of think through how we can meet the MBTA communities and not having layered through the ADU part.
Well, you have to think of them in conjunction because it's a numbers game. If we zone for MBTA and then in 6 months we have the ADU bylaw.
They're both laws that the state is, requiring. So at some level, we're going to have MBTA communities that we have to do. What level is unknown yet. And we have to do this ADU, or, I mean, it's as an as of right, use, whether we zone for it or not. So what I'm trying to do is say, if we're required to do the rapid transit 25%, how can we make an adjustment from what we had before that addresses some of the concerns? I think if we try and throw ADU into it, it's just going to confuse it.
Well, I don't think so at all. I think if you have a parcel that's smaller than what we're limiting this to, and then it gets developed, we're missing units.
But if you have a single that adds an ADU, that's not a multifamily.
If you have a two-family and it's ADU, it is.
But how many of those? We have 8 of them in this.
At that certain parcel size. How many do you have at 5,000 square feet?
Become a two-family.
Oh, 2 can go to 3. Any residentially,
right.
any residentially zoned parcel gets to add a unit. It's not a single family.
Right.
So if you have a 2-family, boom, it's a
They could
3.
add
You have a
a-
3, it's a 4. So once
what
again,
you're-
we're crazy not to take
And,
advantage of that.
They could tear down.
It's by right. They can do whatever they want.
Tear down.
So I think it might be, and maybe everyone can make a note, and I'll do the same, when we go to this ADU kind of session. It's an interesting question if a two-family with an ADU is a multifamily building or not. I know, and it's kind of mind-boggling to even ask the question. It's a building with 3 units in it, but there are legal distinctions between single-family, multifamily, ADU, et cetera. So I think Jim is onto a really interesting line of inquiry here. I think we'll need to confirm, like, is a 2-family plus 1 ADU count as a multifamily structure? I'll try to get some clarity on that, but that may be a kind of a philosophical question for a lot of people.
Well, here, if we look at this chart, we have 12 parcels that are 2 families in the 6,200 to 7,500. We have 19 parcels in the 5 to 6,200 and 11 in less than 5,000. So we're looking at, let's see, 42 parcels plus the 18. So 60 parcels that are 2 families that could add 1 unit.
That's 60 units. That's a net new of 60.
So to Tim's
Correctable.
point, though, I think the question, we need to find out how that's going to be viewed.
Well, I couldn't see, yeah, that's speculation, that's true. I mean, I just imagine if I was a building inspector and somebody turned their 2-family into a 3, but it didn't have to meet the 3-family code, it's a ridiculous liability. So what you don't have
You
to
still
have.
have to meet building codes. Is that what you mean?
So with a 3-family, isn't it sprinkled buildings, fire-rated walls? It's
That's the thing about it.
separate smoke, separate utilities.
Well, an accessory dwelling unit, no. It'll be
Then it's
interesting to see what, like, the current requirements are that the electric is not a separate electric because it can't be, really basically sold off as a separate unit. It'll be interesting to see how all that gets viewed. Like this, you're not required to bring, you're not allowed currently, like, to bring in a separate, water service.
Utilities.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is
You have to
interesting.
provide water by law as a landlord, I think.
Yeah, it is interesting to see, though, what the future is if you look at California. I think California is now looking at to see if they can sell the ADU separately. So I feel like we do have to look to see what the trend is, because that could be coming this way, because that's what it seems like is happening.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing about that health report, I think it said the average value of the single-family home in Milton's over $900,000. That, I think there were over 1,200 homeless people in Milton. And, you know, and I think there were 14 children in the public schools who were homeless. You know, housing, you know, is just, whether it's something that ends up being rented or sold, you know, all of these are just tools to try and get more housing to put to meet the need that people have and try and bring the price down, the cost down. But
I gotta say, I like where you're going with the 6250. I just think it should be a little lower, that's all.
yeah,
I mean, this is an excellent analysis.
So, I mean, we could add a chart, you know, add to the chart, you know, to add to the chart to see what that would do.
And we can play
But-
around, yeah, we
Yeah.
can play around
It
with
was
this.
done at one point. I mean, I printed it off and put it somewhere, but I think
Yeah,
it
I
was.
think the question just became whether you can meet the open space requirements, et cetera.
Well, we can change that, right?
Well, whether it's
I mean, that was a-
desirable to change it or not. I mean, there are 400
Well-
and some single-family homes here where people were, you know, we heard from people who were concerned about not having it all paved over and all built over. They wanted
And
trees
our greenhouse gases are up in Milton, Jim.
I'm sure they are.
All right, so, I mean, I think we should have some discussion.
Sorry,
We need trees.
talking to the wrong guy. Where is it?
No, this is a
Oh, no,
great
it
exercise.
wasn't.
I think this is-
I could have swore it was done.
But you're right, we could almost, yeah, take a look at the Blue Hills Parkway
5,000
too.
square feet.
Yeah, and what I
lot
was
size.
thinking is, I mean, if you all think this is worth
7,500?
thinking about, then we could ask you to take a look at it as well, just to
And the thing is,
confirm.
the buildings, the houses that you have chosen, they're pretty houses. So especially the one on, like Blue Hill Parkway, to
Yeah.
me, it's just so pretty.
Yeah.
And to add one other unit isn't that detrimental. You know, I lived right,
Yeah.
you know, a
There's
couple
some really
houses down.
big,
They're so
good,
pretty.
beautiful.
But my fear, and I know we're doing this to incentivize tear downs. And I would hate to see, like, this works, putting an extra 1 or 2 units into some of these will work because they're pretty. If they do tear it down, the question is, does it work? Because the buildings
gonna
aren't,
be boxy
they're
and-
not
Yeah, I
pretty.
mean, right, like across the street from these might be some singles that are like starter homes, and you kind of hate to see those, right? So that's another level of on-the-ground analysis, you know, that I think we would want to do before we would say, yes, this is something to pursue.
So
But,
can I just interrupt one more time?
sure.
September 7th, planning board update, there was a 5,500 square foot analysis done when we were calling it the transit area triplex. And that got us to 440 net new in that. So it's really not that much more from the numbers that you're showing at 6,200.
Well, back to, let's see.
Right, it was
these-
302 plus 112, right?
So the Elliott Street corridor, the unit capacity was 480, but it was thought to be 70 for net new, but the reality is it's
I'm sorry, I'm talking about at 6,250 square foot parcels.
the net new for those
Yeah. What was the net new there?
for 112.
What's the 302?
That's the actual net new rather than 70. The in orange is just those parcels of between 62.5 and 7,500.
So is it 302 plus 112 or
Yes.
just one? Oh, okay, so it's
112, yeah.
414 versus 440. No? Am I missing something? I'm sorry.
I don't have what in front of me, Jim, but this was net new? Or
Last
model
column, right?
capacity?
Last column net new
Oh,
at
yeah.
5,500 square feet.
Yeah, 440 versus here before 14. So
So it doesn't hurt to go down, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I just don't know the boundaries of that.
Okay.
I guess we could look at, yeah.
Yeah, that's all. I don't
How-
mean to
how
go
does that
backwards
work?
anymore.
My feeling was that the Elliott Street corridor, generally, not everyone was supportive, obviously, because I'm sure you look and people voted, not everyone there voted supportive of it. But we would need to go back out and, I think, do some community outreach on it. But to me, going to, this doesn't get you as many at 87, but in some ways going to allowing 4 units on the larger, people would still be able to see that they have the same open space. You can accommodate these on a larger parcel. Whether you went as far as that would be, whether you did that, I don't know. And whether, you combine it with that is another.
Yeah. And I almost wouldn't mind carving off like the 25,000, 20,000, 17,000. You're really not gaining that many units in that area.
Yeah.
And
That
that's
just-
where I'm afraid you would have the tear downs.
Yeah,
So
totally.
maybe that, like on the ground can, like I'm just thinking about Norway Road, like
Yeah.
huge, big lots, beautiful homes, and I could see,
And the FAR and those were, they were big.
That's why we were scaling that.
Yeah.
But I think if you even went 4 units there, like you don't.
That
go-
would-
Go
yeah.
4 on those, because then you can add a 3-family even
right.
at the
And
back
I'd have
of
to
a
look
single.
at, some of those aren't that big of houses, but the lots are big, but the houses
big.
aren't necessarily that large, but
There's,
that would be an area that would really change the character of the town. But
well,
we
that's,
can,
yeah, that's where I think that this
Look at
one,
this,
which
yeah.
has, only goes to 4 units on all of those
Mm-hmm.
larger, is, all new capacity of 87. And that's pretty, and then if you did, we
Yeah.
looked at maybe a little bit expanded boundary.
right,
And then another is to look at the smaller ones,
Yeah.
I don't think we could say today which one's the right way without looking a little more on the ground and
Exactly.
parcel by parcel.
right.
But can I go
This
through?
is good.
Okay.
Yeah, keep going.
Just to the other sites now? Or do we
Sure.
want to have some discussion about what we do with this next? We could have Util start to look at it. We could ask Util to think about the boundary. And then whether I or
I think we should
Util
look at the
take a
boundaries.
look at
I
this.
don't think they would know intimately,
Okay.
like as,
So you had ideas about the boundary, Meredith. Do you want to think about that?
Yeah.
And maybe I can look at these 6250 and 5,000 square foot lots and get a little, Jim, when you said on the going to 5, if I look at
yeah, I can tell you which
these are
roads I would take off.
5,000 square foot lots with 2 families on them. And right now, the open space in the back is you have 50% of the property is open space and you're sharing a driveway. So where you get the 3rd unit here without dropping below 40%, so that's the concern, because then it's a tear down. If you can't add it with, onto the property, then somebody would, do a tear down.
So
And
to
that's why.
disincentivize the tear down, you may have to change that 40%. I mean, I know you don't want to hear that, but
Well,
I mean,
I don't think it's a good idea myself to change the 40%. That's why I think going down to 5,000 is challenging, and I don't think it's necessary. I think we can make it
Maybe,
up, but,
yeah.
I mean, that's your suggestion, and, we should put it
Yeah.
on the table.
if the lawsuit comes in and we have to do 25%, I think we have to go to 5,000. If the lawsuit comes in and we settle at 10%, I think we're good. But,
I think that's going to be something that we should get public feedback on, because
Yeah.
before we heard a lot of people say that there should be some distribution across town. So that's why this was really more just trying to tinker and not be
Right.
radically different, because
But this
town
takes-
meeting passed this before, and tinkering with it would address concerns and not have a radical new approach.
And I
But-
think this is a means of taking a lot of units off the Granite Ave South.
oh yeah,
and
Yeah,
looking at, this is one alternative,
Yeah,
but
it's one
there's
alternative,
multiple
right.
alternatives.
I
so-
get it. I totally
Yeah,
get it.
So, well, maybe what we should do is run through and then we can talk
right.
about next steps.
Why don't you?
Yeah, I know everybody else had location ideas too. I just want to run through the ones that I had thrown out, or I wanted to throw out. So I just, they're the dots here, and obviously 2 of them are within the commuter rail and 2 aren't. This is the parcel that's a Copeland. I don't really like to necessarily call out like the ownership, but it's what everybody knows it as. It's at the intersection of Randolph Ave and Hillside. It's 9.77 acres. So if you just were trying to swap out a parcel, the Granite Ave is Mass DOT part of it only, not the Legion and not North, is 9 acres. So, you know, by just to sort of think about comparable land areas. Now, whether this got less units, just like we were just talking about, you know, I think would make sense. But this is just taking the same, what we did at South and applied it to here. So I think this parcel is one to look at, whether it's at this density or not. And then this is, because it's, you look at some of our criteria, it has a lot of building and pavement already. It has grass, but not a lot of tree cover. And it's on a bus line on Randolph Ave, the bus 240 to Ashmont.
That's an interesting one. We hadn't looked at,
No.
we hadn't discussed that one.
And it's again, one of those that, I mean, it's owned by a foundation
know.
that could very well never want to change. So it's,
Until their board changes.
yeah, I'm not looking at, I'm
Newcomb
just,
Farms,
again,
not
it's
the-
more.
It would be a shame to do anything on that field. It's so gorgeous when you're
Not on
driving
the
into
field, I'm
town.
looking, I was,
I'm just like
Next one.
looking at land area
I get
and
it.
some of the other criteria. We'd have to run through all of the selection criteria, and you know, the numbers may not pan out for it. This is where you can see where it's captured up at big blue at the top, but down where I've got this sort of trapezoid highlighted is that nursing home, which is 5.76 acres. 2 Granite Ave is 3.6.
What nursing home? 1200 Brush Hill Road?
Yeah, the one next to
1200, yeah.
Winter Valley, I mean, not Winter Valley,
Next to
Fuller
Flatley
Village.
Field.
Yeah. I thought we were going to look at the
You
vacant
talked about
parcel
some of
next
those
door.
other parcels around it, Jim, but if you just
Yeah.
isolate just this parcel, it is the minimum parcel sub-district. It's over 5 acres.
Yeah.
And so, to me, you know, it's a 1 mile away from the commuter rail, so it's not, I mean, it's closer than some other parts of town. So that's one. And it's mostly built, right? Because you're not talking about the field on the left. It's called the Brush Hill Care Center. So it's, and then this is the one that's within the half mile of Fairmont Station, but it also is close to the paper mill site. So I was wondering whether there's a way to make that a combined
right, that's,
district. I know it has to cross over public land, so I don't know, but
When you might remember when we were talking about contiguity in the Granite Ave district, our first attempt at contiguity was to sort of include the DCR-owned marshland, kind of that goes up against the highway, and that was not deemed to be a valid means of attaining contiguity for the district. So I think, you know, we have precedent of them kind of saying like, look, this is undevelopable state land between 2 parts of your district. So, you know, think about the paper mill site kind of like Granite Ave North.
I do think it's a little different though, Tim, because you can't, this thing is locked between a train and the river, and then the town and the DCR land. So that means you can't include this in anything, which
it's unfortunate.
which
because
is, yeah, it's like North, Granite Ave North, I feel like they should have considered that a little differently too, but we were able to combine those two, north and south. That's the only way we were able to pick up north.
I mean, we were able
I
to
think
do
we
that
achieved that with the
because they,
road, right?
The road.
yeah, they kind of allowed us to stretch the definition of, you could have either side of, Beacon Street as the same district. They're separated by a right of way. They considered the 93 interchange there to be a big right of way. This one is not just the train tracks, not just Truman Parkway, but also the DCR land. So, I mean, we can certainly ask, but I think just our very recent history with Granite Ave kind of tells me it's not looking good for the paper mill site.
Well, if you continue a little further down Truman Highway, and then you had a narrow sliver that crossed over to this parcel, would that work? Because that parcel needs access, and it's going to come from the Milton side. It's not going to come across the river. So if that ever gets developed, it will come from Truman Highway, right?
Yes.
So why not have some? I know, I'm just
Yeah.
kind of trying to give us some argument.
An
They may
argument.
still say
The
no.
argument is if they want housing.
Exactly.
This
We've already
is
got
a
the
good
zone for
place it.
multifamily in our,
That's part of my, I've got a lot of problems, but this is part of my problem is there are areas in town that make sense.
yeah.
Like from our own planning perspective. And it makes sense to support the state's initiative to create more housing. So that's why it's a shame to me that they're not being a little bit more flexible.
I mean, I think the counter argument is like, yeah, we're interested in building housing. Why would we try to rezone a parcel that already has zoning and hasn't been redeveloped in 17 years?
Because I think we could put a higher level of density than,
It's as of right.
and
Plus, values have come
and-
up in 17 years
That's right,
to make
yeah.
this thing worth it.
It's as of right.
That's the real issue.
Don't we have a
I
special
mean-
permit process on the existing zoning? So it would be as of right under this. You're right, Maggie.
I mean, what's the value of the as of right process versus the? I mean, is it still? I mean,
I think it's very valuable.
Huge.
And I've had conversations with folks that have been interested in purchasing this parcel. Conversations that have gone, to the DCR and MBTA level. And the problem that this parcel always encounters is MBTA is not going to accede to a at-grade crossing of the Fairmount Line tracks. And so your access to that site is a single lane under the viaduct that just does not work for access for 90 units.
Well, how about coming across the river? That's how they came before?
Well, how about coming out over wetlands on Randolph Ave, 90 units, and there's no light on Randolph Ave for those 90 units?
I think if we can like I said, we can certainly ask HLC if we can make a contiguity argument here. It's definitely something worth asking. This is not a basket I would put a lot of eggs in.
maybe you two
Okay.
could sort of look at this
Yeah, and I don't know
in
that.
a way that might help
I mean,
us.
the density level here that you would have to do on the single families, it just may not make any sense. But we, just in the spirit of showing that we looked at things that people asked about, because people did ask about this, whether it's the state or whether it's the density, it just may not be suitable. At least we go through the exercise. And this one is near the Reedville station. And within that, there's just on the Wolcott Road, there's St. Pius, and they have a vacant parcel, and the church itself. And I did wonder about going down Big Blue and picking those up with this. I don't think I show a map. Oh, yes, I do, here. Because there's some larger parcels, and if that ever did sell, then we would have something in place for it. Because as we know, the rectory there sold, and that ended up being developed into those townhouses. Tim, do you know what that was on a density level? The Woodmere?
Woodmere?
Yeah,
I can do some quick math.
okay, because maybe we pick that up in the district if it's at the right density level, because it's right there. But again, this would take a little study, but
That's an interesting site, too.
yeah, I think maybe this might,
That's half mile of the subway, or the commuter rail.
Commuter rail.
yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more
So
obviously to the rectory, I
So
mean, to the
it
church,
fits
but
the statute.
yeah.
Yeah, at least it makes sense.
So I think that's it for me, yes.
That's great.
I can stop the
We'd
share.
also, we talked a little bit about the Randolph Ave 40B.
701? Yeah, totally.
Which.
Tim, you had one very
411.
early on that picked up that, right? That I don't think Util ever studied. That
Yeah,
on
we
Randolph
looked at,
Ave?
we looked at 728 and the horse farm as a kind of combined parcel. UTL did do a little bit of analysis on that.
Now, this is across the street, the one that's underway, under construction right now. I think it's 701?
40B site,
711,
7-Eleven.
711, I'm
7-Eleven,
sorry,
how many-
711.
7 acres.
that's 7 acres.
Perfect.
So that,
Just overlays on it, done. Right, just
I
give
would
it a,
think
you
that
have a
would
look
be
at
a-
it. Hey, it's a no-brainer.
one that we should,
Yeah.
we should ask UTL to look at
Should
that,
take advantage of
7-Eleven.
that.
And then we should look at 648 Canton Ave also. That's like 5.23 or something.
That's one that I think potentially land court issues with access, driveway access on there. So,
Interesting.
It's also, it would be subject to wetlands regs, so, I mean, while you could, which the 40B is not really in
So
some
what would
way,
happen if we overlay zone it and then it gets thrown out? It's unbuildable.
Oh,
That's actually
If the-
perfect. That adds to our numbers and then nothing gets built.
well, not necessarily, they sell and somebody builds under the zoning.
right.
Builds under the zoning, yeah, I
Instead
guess.
of the
You're in
40B.
So,
Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna stop the share because I can't really see Randolph
Yeah,
out there.
so next steps, I think we're asking UTL to look at the paper mill creatively, if there's any way that we could, they could help us advocate for.
So the thing is what density level would we want them looking at? So I guess, one thing, if we think about like the ones near the commuter rail station, do we ask them to look at 15 units an acre? So this might be gearing more towards the 10% or towards the whatever third option is. And maybe we look at the nursing home and the Copeland as replacements for Granite Ave South. So like if I'm thinking about what my options are for addressing the 25%, it's finding an alternative to Granite Ave South and having a rebalance a little bit. That's it. Then I go on to, I'm looking at the commuter rail stations and I think then we look at Elliott with respect to the Blue Hill Ave station, right? So
I think 7-Eleven, definitely, we should,
yeah, also as an alternative.
as an
Yes,
alternative also.
Yes,
Yeah.
agreed.
I'm not a huge fan for the Copelands. I think
Yeah.
I've said it before. I don't think they're interested in it. They've done so much for our town
That's what makes me
that,
nervous.
that,
just so
that
that it
I,
might-
So I think we can rate it and we can have reasons for not wanting it, just like we have reasons for not wanting something else. But I don't.
And it's on a
I
scenic
feel like-
roadway.
I feel like.
It's just
in
a
the
shame
spirit
to
of
see
looking
that
at options,
developed.
we shouldn't take things off the table that could work. And we run it through the process. And it might not be our recommendation, but then if people ask us, did you look at this? Did you look at that? Did you look at this?
say we've looked at everything.
Like the
Drive
Thomas
around
Nursery
town
property,
looking.
was another one, Thomas Nursery. And again, I know that you said that's a terrible site for various reasons, but again, if we're looking at what's a large parcel, it should be run through. So,
And I believe we looked at Winter Valley, but that, because the acreage was so large, it dragged our
much.
numbers down
yes.
Yeah.
significantly. So just, that was one that
And
we
what
did
about
look at.
Quizit Brook?
It's like the same thing there.
I think it was, Tim
It
said
was
the
the
same
land
thing.
area.
What
Yeah,
about-
you'd need to have significant number of
Density.
units on Winter Valley, Quistit Brook,
What happened
in
in
order
Fuller
to
Village.
hit the density
I mean,
that we need.
Yeah, I still go back to, I do think, the zoning is still good. I mean, the statute is still a good statute. And I think I've said it before, we should give some of our residents the opportunity to take advantage of it. And I think going up Blue Hill Ave, by 7 Brush Hill Road, but going up that and giving all those current residents an opportunity to convert their single or 2-family to a 3-family. I think that's a positive thing, and it's within a half a mile of the Blue Hill Ave commuter. So I wouldn't even mind looking further up, and I think UTL might have looked at it, and I don't even know why we.
Yeah, so I think, Tim, to Maggie's point, the half mile, if we could look at the Blue Hill Ave district with respect to the half mile of the Blue Hill Ave commuter rail, instead of just this piece that we have right now. I mean, we may find that, I know that we looked at a larger area there before and we peeled it back, but is it worth, well, we should definitely look at it as it relates to the commuter rail.
In the Amore Road, that's 16 units per acre, that 40B there. So I don't know if that stretch we could incorporate and take advantage of that.
Not a well-loved density there, but
Yeah.
that's where I do think it's challenging to add even that Blue Hills Parkway area more to the density levels that we have in the Elliott Street corridor, because they're not getting us to 15 units an acre, and 15 units an acre is Amore, and it is Brush Hill Road 40B, and those aren't something people really like in their neighborhoods. So that's why these larger parcels that are on roadways like Randolph Ave or Granite Ave, make sense to be a balance, to help balance it out, in my mind.
What about the parcel on Brush Hill Road that's adjacent to 1200 Brush Hill Road? Remember we talked about that and Tim was going to look into it? Tim, did you ever look into that one?
On the corner of the ball fields?
No, not the fields and not 1200, but
Which one's 1200?
There's a parcel that's that's owned by Fuller Village.
Right,
That's contiguous.
yeah.
to Fuller. I mean,
Oh, right, there's 2 parcels.
yeah. We talk about this every time I bring it up, and then nothing
what
ever
do we? I
happens.
mean, what do we want to look at there? I mean, I think
There's
it's
Want to look
wet.
at the development potential. Is it over 5 acres, and what can we do with it? I mean,
But it's combined with Fuller.
it's a separate parcel, though.
Yeah,
Separate.
2 separate parcels.
but it's under our same ownership, right?
So what?
I don't see what advantage that has over just using the nursing home property, which is clean.
The nursing home property is going to be too many units. That's a big building.
Not if we do some balancing
I
out.
would think, though, that we just went through the memory care and we talked about the need.
That's a good point,
How
too.
there's such a need for nursing homes and memory care. My fear is if we did that at 1200, the owners of the facility, they're going to flip it and become housing.
So that's another thing that we put over on our evaluation, is that,
Tear down.
if that's a tear down possibility, then we put that,
And
again,
not
it's
just a
just
tear
in the
down, but it
spirit.
would be a change of use. I mean, the building is a very pretty building.
It could be converted.
Yeah, it's.
But what if the nursing home doesn't do well there and they need an alternative use? Converting it to housing would be ideal for them. I mean,
I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying, what about the other parcel that's near it? That's all. I mean, I'm not.
That other parcel isn't another parcel apparently. That's connected to the Blue Hill Ave part of Fuller Village.
By a string.
Yeah, so they can use it there as one,
It's part of their land.
it's, yes, yeah,
Part of
but
their
not
density.
across,
Could they spin it off? I mean, could they sell it?
Probably would throw them out of compliance with their zoning at that point, if they're using it as part of their units per acre calculation.
You can't tell if that little triangular shaped parcel is more than 5 acres, can you, Tim?
yeah, that's more than 5.
I think it is because that whole thing is like 29. Just the Caroline Drive area.
Yeah, I wish I could do this.
I know.
Look at this guy, right? I thought the frozen cells was good.
Yeah.
It's a great tool.
Yeah, 7, 7.25.
So that,
Personally, I would look at that, see what the
Yeah.
potential is there.
Tim's been talking about that for a while. We gotta
He wants to build on it.
like shut him up.
Yeah, I know, the only way, yes, I know, right?
what kind of
Right?
density?
In
I
the
mean,
spirit of
the-
looking at all the options.
Right.
Well, I think the problem with this is
Thank
that
you,
you
Maggie.
can't test
None
you
taken.
can't test it without bringing in the acreage of the main parcel. If this is a single parcel,
The way the state does.
the compliance model is going to treat it as a single parcel, and so you're getting all of the units from the bigger portion of it.
You know, that
Like,
was the
as a
part we didn't understand because it's not a single parcel. It's actually 2 different parcels. The hangup was it was under the same ownership. And to me,
Well,
that just didn't make sense because if it's a single standalone parcel, you can do whatever it is you want with it.
But apparently. the
But
state
I guess what I'm saying is like
joined them.
it's not being treated as a single parcel, and so it won't be treated as a single parcel in the model. And so anything that you do on this is going to include over here. As a practical matter, you know, existing permitting notwithstanding, yeah, you could spin that off and do whatever you wanted with it. But in order to test it, I don't think we have a means to test it in the compliance model unless we went and,
I was gonna say,
I
can
don't
you
even
do
know,
it in
just-
the residence
Yeah.
densities model?
Yeah, just do it by hand or something, and I don't know what that means, but it's a shame not to use it because our model doesn't recognize it.
Yeah,
It just seems like a great opportunity.
that's where the limitations of the model.
well, I mean, and it's also kind of the philosophy of the model is you're dealing with the parcels that you have, not the parcels that you wish you had. So like
I
to
guess
use
I'm missing the wish
this
you
would
had part.
assume, you know, a sort of an action by Fuller Village that, you know, they may or may not take.
Well, who's this owner?
Isn't,
It doesn't say Fuller Village.
That's because he's got it pointing
Stephen
to a different
Campbell?
property.
Okay, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's the Blue Hill.
you just made Stephen
Well,
Campbell
maybe
rich
just,
sitting
we
there.
could ask you, Teal, if there's,
The guy's like, really?
Kept his
if they have any thoughts on how we could utilize that parcel.
There's gotta be a way.
And get around, you know,
So,
understanding the model.
so in having them look at parcels, part of it is going to be what do we want to accomplish on the parcel, right?
Right.
So,
I would say 20 units per acre on some of the ones that we've been discussing. Go above
so Tim, can you,
15 units?
actually, maybe, how
Like
about,
20.
how about we do this? If they did confirm some of what I did and then said, okay, that means the density level that you're looking at now on a parcel like Granite Ave South is X, then we could start applying that to these other parcels, because then we know that we're going to be in the range of the 15 units an acre. Because once we start adding land areas that's different size, you know, do you understand what I'm saying, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. So the changes to Elliott Street lead, and then
And then
we
that
start
means you can take some unit capacity away from a larger parcel. Let's say it's Granite Ave South. Or you could then take that reduced capacity parcel and of about the same size somewhere else, right? So instead of Granite Ave South, it's maybe on Randolph Ave, or maybe it's this Brush Hill Road site.
And maybe 90 units on each side, you know, would
Schuman
eventually.
Parkway.
Truman Parkway.
It just kind of, but it depends how much land area is added that would still keep us in the 15 units an acre. So they would have to look at, okay, maybe you have to go down to 6250. Maybe you have to go to the 4 units. Maybe you even have to go more, you know, or that won't work at all. Or here's what, if you did these things and you added and you use these parcels, here's how many units you would have to have on Granite Ave South or Randolph Ave or Brush Hill Road.
Yeah, wouldn't it be easier for them to start with the bigger parcels and see what we came up with? So like start at Truman Parkway, you know.
But you need to know what your goal is, right? So if your goal is we don't know what the zone capacity.
To put as many units as we can without negatively impacting the neighborhood.
Yeah, so what
Well,
do we
I
decide
think
that is?
I think from the perspective of the constraints of both the guidelines and the model, like I think that, you know, figuring out, because Elliott Street checks a lot of boxes for you in terms of contiguity, in terms of transit proximity, in terms of all of that. So, you know, we're talking about turning up the dial a little bit on Elliott Street to, you know, we'll obviously have to talk to folks and open it up and figure out what a tolerable level is. But that as sort of the first step, because you have to think, you know, what are we solving for? And ultimately, and I don't want to speak for, you know, the majority of Miltonians, but I think we're solving for Granite Ave and East Milton, which I think are the districts that folks kind of agreed had too many units. And so it's not necessarily that we're, you know, I don't think anyone's dying to put units on Truman Parkway or Randolph Ave or the Copeland property or anything. These are potential solutions to the problem of Granite Ave and East Milton. So I think figuring out Elliott Street first, what is the reduction we can do on the east side, and then what is the remainder that we have to make up with some of these other potential districts.
All right, so does that sound like a reasonable charge to you, Teal?
Yeah, I want to make sure like we're 100% clear on. So Cheryl, you've got your, and if you don't mind, or if the board doesn't mind, if I paid very close attention to your presentation, Cheryl, but a follow-up conversation just to make sure I'm clear on what the homework is might be helpful.
And we could share this with you, Teal, obviously. But
Yeah. No, for sure. And then, you know, so what are the other geographies that we want to look at? You know, assuming the step 2 is reduction on Granite Ave South and a reduction in East Milton, or?
So
711 Randolph Ave would be included.
711 Randolph.
And I'm still hung up on that little 7-acre parcel by
Fuller Village.
Fuller Village, if we can find a way to,
And then the
Call
ones
it 2
that
lots.
the ones that I ran through, do you agree that we should just take a look at?
1200 Brush Hill Road, we should take a look at.
All right, so you'll get those. You have this presentation, Tim, so if you can get those locations from it.
I'd use Copeland as a last resort, personally.
I'm not,
I get it, I'm just saying, yeah.
we just have to say that we looked at all the sites that have been thrown out and that are of large enough size.
And if we are able to make up enough, I think I do have concerns about losing commercial in East Milton Square. There's definitely some parcels I'd like to carve out and we could talk about, but maybe we don't even need it. But we also have said we're doing overlay zoning, so we'd like to get credit.
I want to
too.
get
So
credit for what we're
yeah.
allowing there, and
So
I
maybe
don't
we
think we
just-
need anything more, but
maybe
I'd
we-
like to get the credit.
reduce just the boundaries a little bit. But
Should we look at 648, even though you're saying it might not work? Just in the spirit of looking at everything and including everything?
I think let's start with the other 40B, the 7-Eleven,
Okay.
and see what we get from
7-Eleven's
that.
a no-brainer, yeah, that's gonna,
Because there are
Right.
some issues with land court on 648.
And then I think maybe you two could look a little and think a little bit about the Blue Hill Ave and the Elliott Street where they come together, because that's within the half mile of commuter rail. And
And like the Milton
I don't know what
Food
we're gonna
Mart,
do, yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
the Knights of Columbus, like that.
because that got excluded before, and those,
Yes, and that is,
those are here in this, but
Yeah.
they're too small to qualify.
and they're in desperate need of
So
revitalization.
if we-
so maybe you lower the square footage and the parcel size there.
Yeah, like I said, I thought, I didn't do the Parkway yet. I have the spreadsheet of each of the parcels. There's 3 churches in that district, and there's a kidder. So I think we need to be thoughtful about it, but it's prime, because
Yeah.
you can get to the commuter rail, and
And it needs it.
and the bike path.
We need it, that needs to be
So-
redeveloped.
It's a sad sight.
I don't know what the right numbers are there, but
Are you saying would it exclude the churches in Kidder?
no, I'm just pointing it out, because if you also look, I
Weren't
know
there
we didn't
6
want to do it,
townhomes
within it
proposed?
here, St. Mary's is within this too. And if we're excluding St. Mary's, but we're including 3 churches on the Parkway, I just think we need to be sensitive
Yeah, to those churches,
to those churches too.
I agree.
So we,
So,
I think we're going to have to look at these boundaries
Yeah.
too, once we
'Cause
get
it's
it.
just- That should be maybe just a 5-acre. Like, see what could be 5-acre.
yeah, the Parkway, if we can make up some of those units. I mean, I do think it's nice if we could do like we're doing in the Elliott Street corridor there, but we're allowing more in the Parkway now. And if we can pick up those somewhere else and allow like the Elliott Street numbers to wrap, I think it may make more sense. But,
we may have to grow the district a little bit in Elliott Street.
yeah. So, all right, are you
let's-
all okay with Tim and I having a conversation about what we've discussed
Yeah,
tonight?
I think
and
that
what
sounds
this-
great.
okay.
I'll follow up with this.
All right.
Sounds good, Tim?
Sounds real good.
Good. This
And
was
it's
a good,
9:51.
it's 9:51.
Yeah.
So I think, is there anything else you had, Tim, for this evening
Nope.
to add or, okay? Anyone else from the board? Anything?
Now, I just want to say thanks for Tim for coming out to our neighborhood, and Cheyenne. Thank you for talking to the neighbors and helping us walk through that. So it'd be great if it could get put on the next agenda.
Yeah.
Always nice
And
to get out of the
have we talked to the
office.
neighbors? Like, do they know, like, if they take down it, they probably won't take down any more sections of that wall?
I haven't personally talked to them, no. And I do think it was just, there was no ill intent and,
Oftentimes.
you know, what, they're doing a great job in this case.
Yeah.
You know, the fear always is it's not going to look like you're hoping it's going to look like. So I think they're doing a great job personally. But it's just the process.
Yeah.
You know, we're just confused by the process. I was confused by the process when someone came and asked me because I've been through it because my old house is across the street
And
from
we
it.
had
And I, you know, have done work on a wall when I lived over there. So I know what the process was. So it just, when someone came to me, it just was different. So it's just trying to, you know, keep it the same.
Good. And thank you, Cheryl,
Oh,
for your
thank
work
you.
on this, for this presentation. This is
And you're welcome.
very good. All right, then I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Thank you.